Okay, cool. Suzanne is here, so that's good. So to start off really quickly, last time we did the webinar, as you all know, and were witness to, my internet was not great. And of course, earlier today, it cut off and scared me to death. So we have been planning for this. If this does cut off, Suzanne, who works with me, is here to help to support the webinar and keep it going. Everyone has the slides. It should be more seamless. If the worst happened, well, that wouldn't be the worst, but it would not be good. Anyways, so we kind of tried to cover our bases there. So thank you, Suzanne, for being here to help back us up. She'll also be answering your questions on the in the chat area while me and Brad go through the steps. One thing that we got a lot of feedback on from the first webinar is that people wanted to see more drawing. They wanted to see more beginning to end work being done. So we're really focusing on that. And one second here. There we go.
Can you see my screen?
I can see your screen. I want to make sure I don't see full screen though. Can you hear me?
I mean, I can hear you.
Okay, cool. Can everybody still hear me? Sorry, I'm like a little bit scarred from, okay, cool. Everyone can still hear me. Thank you. Okay, cool. So anyway, Suzanne's going to be on the side fielding questions from you guys, and we are basically going to go through and we have all of, from the feedback we sent you, we got everything we learned that would help you the most, and we are going to go through that. Also, on the downloads page for the resources, we've added 7 texture videos. We've added a mock-up for the Golden Books. Special thanks to Bill from Dragonfish Studios, who made this amazing mock-up for you guys that you can use.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah,
it's super nice. Yeah.
It's super amazing. He laid it out so beautifully. And you guys can put your work in there. I also put a hashtag in my Instagram username, so you can post your work and we'll share your work. I'll certainly show your work on my feed if you post it up there and hashtag it and tag me. So the first thing I want to do is I wanted to show you guys something. I'm basically going to have a little slideshow going on with you guys to help reinforce what Brad's doing. So give me 1 second here while I get that going.
That'll be nice. Yeah, we decided to do this time so to keep us all in line. Because last time, it was hard because, we've been doing lots of things. We've been doing a lot of these like free webinars and types of events with you guys. And so we felt really comfortable. I guess we felt really comfortable being around you guys. And so we kind of kept it a little bit looser and more conversational. And it also, the downside to that was some people didn't know us as well. Plus, the content, we didn't get to cover as much as we wanted to, or it was we jumped in and out of lines. So now we're trying to be as organized as humanly possible and get this all ready for you. So you know what to expect, and we can deliver something to you that will be truly helpful for you guys. Yeah,
totally. Okay, so Brad's working on this illustration. As you can see, Brad made a brand new illustration for you guys. He's just finishing it up right now, quite literally, but we are going to go from start to finish through this. But first I want to show you a couple slides. So give me a minute here. This is going to make you lose Brad's illustration for a second, but I promise we'll come back to it in just a second.
Just tell me when.
Okay. Are you guys seeing my screen right now? I can't, all of a sudden can't see. Yeah, I think you guys are seeing my screen.
I can see your screen. There's a whole lot going on there. Holy stuff.
Okay, yeah, I'll clear this off. So tell me, Brad, if you can't see my screen. I'm going to go through a couple slides.
I can. I just took over my whole screen. Nice.
Okay. Yeah, sorry about that. Okay, so first of all, you guys all did an amazing job. Around 50 people submitted work, which was amazing. So I thought I'd show a few highlights of some work. Here we've got this amazing one of Thumbelina that was done. Actually, I'm going to share partially because I really want to be able to show credit to who did these.
Yeah, you guys, just in general, overall, you guys did an amazing job. A lot of these times I'm like, you guys, you think you're like, oh wow, I totally did a great job teaching it, but no, this stuff was you guys just coming to the table being awesome artists to start with. So I was really, really impressed, and I'm glad. It was fun to do the feedback in a way where you asked the question and I didn't go through it because I didn't feel like qualified. Sometimes I feel like I open this up and I'm like, I don't know, I wish I did this. So yeah, congratulations on doing something so awesome. And I tried to give you feedback as as specific as possible to your questions so that I didn't deviate, because there wasn't much. I wasn't looking for anything negative. You guys did such a great job. It was easy. So
yeah, it was mind blowing. So here's a couple of them. So here's Susanna Mosher. Pardon me if I pronounce any of these names wrong. For Thumbelina, we have Daniel Boone. This one was by Sarah Vaughn. The Three Little Pigs by Lori Rudolph. Red's Christmas Tree Farm by Ben Jones. Coraline by Alex Parker. The Little Red Hen by Sarah Straub. The Three Mindful Bears by Damian Williams. Southern Fried Fairy Tales by Bear Edwards. The Clever Little Tailor by Corey George. And Bigfoot Visits the City by Bill, I'm going to destroy this, Akunovix, Bill Akunovix. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into the presentation. I'm going to share a little bit about each part of the process that Brad's working on, and then we'll flip over to Brad, and you'll kind of see Brad working on it.
Sounds good to me.
Cool. Okay. So part one is engaging compositions. One thing that, as we look through all this, Brad thought would be really important was to go more into engaging compositions. And this is about, sketching and getting the initial idea out. So we want to talk about first of all, sketching. If you look at early golden books, this is one from Mary Blair, and you guys all know her work. It's absolutely amazing. And you can see it starts with very simple multiple sketches. They're just thumbnails of different concepts and different ways of how the story is going to be played out. So the sketching can start very, very messy. And I don't think Brad would mind me saying that his often start out as very messy sketches.
No, really messy, and you'll see. You will see.
Second, I had never known this, but Brad has something he does called a value test. And this very much applies to things like golden books as well. But you can see in his Puss in Boots, he will get it and put it in black and white. So you could bring your work into Photoshop or color it with these tones just to get an idea. You can see from this clearly the center point of the composition is the cat. You can tell by the darkness of the values that's the main part. And if you look off in the distance, you'll notice, for instance, the hills right here are almost matching with the white because they're so far away. So that's the first part. We're going to talk about engaging compositions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let you kind of check out Brad as he's working on the very, very beginning of this composition that you're seeing right now.
Sweet. Yeah, thanks. Can you see my screen now?
I think each time we do this, you'll have to reshare.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll jump on right now and do that. Luckily, this Zoom is so much easier than our last program. Does that work now? We good?
Yep, I can see it.
Sweet. All right. Hold on. Let me put up. Okay. Cool. Yeah. So I went through. It was funny because Dustin was. We were trying to plan out how to do this. This second lesson or the second class, and one thing I noticed was after going through and trying to give feedback to you guys and seeing all the work that you guys did, I kind of felt like I needed to redo one to kind of incorporate all the things all the feedback that I wanted to give or that I felt like I was constantly sharing, which one big one was contrast. And so you probably a bunch of you are like, oh yeah, he mentioned that in mine, because I did a lot about contrast. So then I went back and I was like, you know, I didn't want to go through my same illustrations. So I wanted to start something new and then try to break it down and make sure you had all the different steps clearly laid out, so it was a lot clearer how I made this. And I should have a process video if Procreate lets me export it correctly. Sometimes it cuts out parts. I'll try my best, and I can even send that as a later thing. Dustin, you keep freezing. I'm hoping you're still there.
Yeah, I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. You're just like your image is freezing a little bit. Okay, so let's start. Yeah, so if we're gonna go straight over to the sketching portion, I love that Mary Blair's like she went through. Some people asked me if we did thumbnails, if that's the process, but people are really interested in the sketching phase, and some of you even just sent in sketches, and I thought that was really cool and totally, it totally worked for me. So on here, what I did was I'll start with really, really, really loose, sketches. And so what I'm doing first is I'm looking for maybe just trying to, not necessarily all like the details of, Puss in Boots. I really just wanted to get like the main gestural gist of what he was going to look like and try to play around with different ideas. And I tried to, and so I tried different poses. I think I have I took a photo. Do I still have it? I'm embarrassed to even show the photo. Maybe I will at some other point, but I do have a photo of me. I'm standing in front of my computer. I did the timer on it, and I wanted to just get different poses of me so I could kind of see how I would like lean on a sword and hold this little mouse. But yeah, so I do have photos of it, and I use that as a photo reference. So you can make your own references by just taking photos of yourself. That's one way to do it. I could have done this in like a thumbnail format, but I didn't. So what I'm trying to do on all of these is I'm just trying to create more and more dynamic, maybe more dynamic, more passive. It just depends on what I want to do. So if I try to be more dynamic, I was like, what if I like zoomed in on the cat's face and he's holding the mouse right in front of him? The only problem I found out is that I couldn't figure out where to put the type for the title. Which maybe I would put it up. Oh, whoops, that's not the right brush. Maybe I would put it up there in the top corner. But I just wasn't really set on a place. Like I could have put Puss in Boots right here or maybe underneath. It just kind of felt weird. But playing around, that's what the thumbnail sketch, that's what the sketches are supposed to be really loose. And you're supposed to figure out, this is just not necessarily no details. This is a really passive layout. When I'm composing it, I was like, you can tell because gosh, I keep jumping out of the same one. So Puss in Boots right here, he's not super a big focus because you get a whole lot of the landscape in here. Now I could play down the landscape by doing different lighting and stuff like that, but right now it just looked passive enough that I didn't want to keep it. It just didn't look very interesting. It felt kind of stiff. So I tried to play it. That was one thing that you guys also had mentioned when we're talking about characters, going in this pose, just having them walking and they just didn't feel like they were interacting. And you're like, how do I make them feel a little bit more lively? Doing things like just contorting the body a little bit. For example, if I was going to draw him again, maybe I would make him, gosh, I keep doing that. Sorry. If you don't have that layer on, it's going to keep bringing that up. So maybe for just an example, what if I had him acting more cat-like? And I had his little boots right here. Again, I'm not really good at sketching because I'm just really fast and gestural at it.
So, hey, Brad, I have to ask. So, if you mentioned you're not good at sketching. How are you? Well, are you looking at something? How are you getting the pose of this cat? What are you looking at to get this?
I've just seen cats before. You can look up online. You can just go online and look through stock photography. That's another way to get some ideas for what things might look like. And you can get pretty weird and specific on stock photography. But so for this one, so this one just and you can kind of play with it. Like tails, I like some of these shapes you can get pretty gestural with them, and you can clean up like how it actually would work and anatomically later. I'm just trying to figure out if it even looks interesting. So maybe if I just had his head, right here, had his ears, maybe his hat's covering this ear, and it kind of goes whatever. It just kind of making it up as you go. But the idea is to play with some more gestural shapes. Maybe it's just the pose itself has more movement in it, and that's more interesting than him just standing there walking, you know. And then maybe he's looking at the mouse. We have the mouse right here. I don't know, and he's holding it up with, you can't see his, maybe the rest of his hand, there's a little paw right there holding on to the mouse tail, his little feet. So he's looking at it right there. And then you could, you know, maybe his arms over there, and then his other arms like right here. So he looks a little more cat-like. Maybe you give him gloves so he still feels like he's, you know, he's more human-like, like in the story, and you give him his belt and all that stuff. Even if his sword was somewhere. But even this is just way more interesting than looking at a flat, like just him walking around, you know, in front of this big pastoral scene, and then you have like this little castle in the background. Granted, you can make that look beautiful by the way you illustrate it, and I'm not saying it isn't, but if you're looking for a way to make something more dynamic, play with scale, play with how close it is, how much it takes up your entire, you know, artboard or your paper. If it's going to take up the whole frame, it's less comfortable just because you don't have really, your eyes don't have a room to escape. So naturally you feel less comfortable, meaning it, you know, that could bring some more interest to it or some more drama to it. I tried to do a little bit, I didn't try to go too crazy with it. I ended up sticking with this guy, and I just wanted him catching. I think I moved his hand up a little bit. Again, if I do that one more time, I'm sorry. Just moving his hand up a little bit, maybe to bring it closer to his eyes, be a little more intimidating, or I can change that pose up a little bit. But that's my initial sketching phase. So I just go through, and I took from the story, if you guys are wondering, like, where do you even get the concept? I read into it, and it said it takes place in, it was an Italian writer who came up with it, who came up with the story, wrote the story in the beginning. So I wanted to kind of have some Italian influences. So I looked up old castles and or big mansions in Italy. I looked up like landscapes out there. I looked up all sorts of little references just to give me hints. And looking back and reading the story, my favorite and most interesting part was when he had the ogre turn into a mouse, and that's how he killed the ogre and took over the castle. So I was like, that's kind of like the coolest part for me. So I thought it might be kind of fun just having a scene where he's caught the mouse, or he's caught the ogre as a mouse, and that was it. So sorry to interrupt there. No. So as someone that is not a great sketcher myself, I kind of like this because it sounds like you're saying, like, when you first, right now you're literally just finding the concept. So you sketch. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to even be close to like the outline of what the final thing is going to be. The point is, will the general idea work? If it works, and let's say you're not familiar with cats, or it's something you're just totally not familiar with, then you can go back once you know that the general composition is working and look at some references, and then you start to really fill out the reality of what it is. Is that, trying to echo back what you're saying? Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah, I definitely think that's how it is. And like, honestly, I do use a lot of references. Like, once I get to the cat one, if it's not feeling like, some things you just know from having seen them a lot, but other times you're like, wow, that just still feels a little off. Go and look at a reference and look at a cat and see, you know, how they act. Watch a video of a cat moving, and you can get ideas. But yeah, I mean, like, you don't, for this purpose, I didn't have to go too crazy deep in detail into it. But it's just, for me, it's like it's just a process of kind of validation. It makes it so that I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that body could, the leg could move that way, and then you can fudge it as much as you want, depending on how, you know, real or interpretive your style is. But yeah, that's the sketching part. I don't want to go too far into that because we have a lot to cover. But the sketching process, really loose. I play around with different forms. You notice I didn't do the background yet, but I do think of the background and try to figure out like how this is going to live in there. This one just happened to be like I did the character first because I felt like I knew it was going to be the hero. I wanted it to be the hero, and so then I tried to put in the background, which I'll show you next. Okay, and just so you know, yeah, well, that fits perfectly. So we have 4 minutes. We got this really organized for you guys. We wanted to make sure we had it literally on a timer. So we got 4 minutes, and then we're going to start going into background, Brad, just so you know. And you guys, we can address things in Q&A at the end, but we want to make sure we hit on everything, so we're being really strict with time. So 4 minutes before we go into backgrounds. Yeah, okay, perfect. Awesome. So let's see. Yeah, and so just as a heads up for everybody, last time we did Photoshop and Illustrator is what we bounced between. I'm trying to take this more on in Procreate. Again, the whole class was not supposed to be dependent on, it wasn't supposed to be aimed at the technical aspects and covering how to use all the tools necessarily. That was definitely going to be included just naturally as we talk about them and use them. But it wasn't an aim to teach you how to use Photoshop better or teach you how to use Procreate better. But since we did do Photoshop and Illustrator last time, we wanted to show you on Procreate how to make this. And just if you have any other, and then, you know, I'll throw in some tips and tricks as I'm going through it. But I just want to make sure everybody felt like they were getting a little bit, they were all getting represented. Because some people didn't have those, some people only had Procreate and vice versa. So that's why we're on Procreate tonight. I don't know if you said that, Dustin, but I just wanted to clarify.
No, I didn't. Yeah, it's a good point.
Okay, just in case there's questions about that. All right, so on the next part of the sketching, so once I've done it, a lot of you also asked, you know, like, I don't know where to take the sketches next. Mine is so this was just the concept sketch for the character. Then I took it and I took that initial sketch that I did. I blew it up. Let's see if it's over here. I blew it up and then I started dropping it into a scene. And so the first thing I did actually on this sketch was do this line behind it. So let me add another page and just show you. So I had my you know, Puss in Boots right here. He's walking and then had his he's holding the mouse hanging here. Let's just say, okay, so that's my main character. I sketched way better than this. This is just really loose. But I think one way to do it, and you notice Mary Blair does this a lot. You'll notice that even in those sketches that you showed Dustin earlier, she kind of divides up her page with lines and kind of, you know, like the rules of thirds and all that kind of stuff. But you know, it's easy to tell if you're being like, if you wanted a symmetrical drawing, like to cut it in the middle so you know exactly where that's at. But I kind of did this thing because I was thinking, okay, I wanted an area specifically for the type this time. I wanted to show off a little bit of the scene, the pastoral type, you know, all the vineyards and things in the background. I wanted to show that off with still having room for the type to kind of show off where it's taking place. I felt like that was important to the story I was trying to tell. So I had Puss in Boots, and I wanted it to overlap a little bit, makes it more interesting than keeping it sectioned off. And I was like, oh, the only reason I put this here is because I was like, I wanted to divide up the image, the background, to help me make it feel a little more interesting. A lot of you had a problem, this is the problem that you brought up, was finding it, like, I just don't know how to handle the background. You'd have like a tree over here and then a tree over here, and didn't feel like there's much of a connection to the rest of it. So one way to do that, because you kind of get lost in the space, there's so many places to put things if you don't have like a little guide. Sometimes this is like a cheater way to do it, is to add some guides. You could put it right in the middle and try to fill quadrants, but it helped me kind of distinguish like where I was going to put my my main character. And I was like, okay, well, it's going to feel a little empty right over here, so I'm going to have to add something, maybe a wagon over here. I'm not sure. I kind of threw that in. I was like, it'd be kind of cool. Maybe this is like a shadow. It's going to be really subtle. I don't need to be really over heavy-handed with it. But then I was going to put something over here because this is going to be really dark, and I was like, well, I might need just something somewhat dark over here. And then I wanted to show the castle, but I figured he did this in the castle, so I made it like in the castle courtyard. And then I was like, I can add some extra little details here. But it just helped me, like, visually, it's a little more interesting. And it helps you place things. So now I'm like, oh, well, I know where my ground is. I already made the ground. I know like this is the end of it could be the end of a wall, and then I could have this little room over here to have like a whole scene. And then I added the little parapets, I think that's what they call them, on the castle, so that it felt more castle-like.
Mr. Woodard.
Yes.
Like that level of respect there.
I do.
I'm going to too far. If it's okay with you, yeah, the alarm went off. It's okay with you. I'm going to flip over into backgrounds right now, and we can come back to any additional questions about this part. Is that okay with you?
That's okay. Yeah, I think that was that's really the only thing I wanted to do. Just in closing, yeah, once I started, I drop in my type and just roughly throw in where all my elements are going to be. And this is the time where you can keep reiterating So I can take this, and like one thing you could do is once you've already made it, let's do this one. Once you've made it, just 2 seconds here, Dustin.
Sure.
Just lower the opacity, or if you're doing this with like a tracing paper, then just draw over top of it and clean that up. Because this time now we can go through and make those shapes, even cleaner. And let's say I wanted to like, have his ear there, and I wanted the hat to cross over and cover that other ear. And then I wanted the hat to kind of come up over here. But this is where you can clean it. And even this one might not be the last one. And it wasn't. So this one I cleaned it up. I made it to this. And then I brought it even from here, from this one, I brought it over to this one. And I went through and I just drew over everything and made it even clearer. And I like to have it to a point where I could almost turn it in and be like, hey, look, it's kind of a cool drawing. I like to have it that far ahead personally, because then I feel like it's almost like I have that map where I can just go dive right into it. And I already know where I'm going to be going. And that's where, Dustin, you said from this point, after this is where I did my value test. Because before I started coloring it, I was really worried about having so many elements in here. As you can see, like the background, like I felt like, oh my gosh, he already looks like he's kind of getting lost. Doing just an outline sketch, it can get kind of lost. So sometimes for me, it's necessary to do these value tests to make things jump off. I don't worry about the lines, but I just want to figure out what the layers are going to be and what's going to stand out in terms of color values. And this, I just keep off to the side while I'm coloring it in later. So that's how I use the value test. All right, sorry, Dustin, I went past, but I feel like I'm good now.
Okay, cool. All right, so I'm going to share this again. And okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is backgrounds. Something when Brad was reviewing that he had mentioned was that a lot of times it didn't feel like the main characters were leaping off the backgrounds. They were kind of blending in with it. So in Little Golden Books, they differentiate between the character and the background in a variety of ways. One way they do that is if you look at like the fuzzy duckling, you'll notice that the background things, there could be a lot more detail added to them, but there isn't. And the reason for that is so the main character, who is obviously this little duck, stands out along with the foliage around him because there's a lot more detail and texture to it, whereas the barn and the stuff in the background tends to fade off. Then we have the three little kittens. In that case, the background is pretty much non-existent. You really just have a vignette of sorts around it. So it's just drawing you in with the brightness of the light in the center of it to the kitten. And then third, and I think most interestingly, is by color. So in this illustration of this rabbit, the rabbit is much brighter colors that draw you in, whereas the background is a lot of very similar dark shades that tend to blend together. Another thing, and this was fascinating to me, is atmospheric perspective. This is something me and Brad had noticed early on when we started looking at these books, and you see this in work today too. If you look in the background, you'll notice that things tend to fade into the background, and they tend to turn the color of the atmosphere because of, I don't know how you'd say it, the atmosphere, the stuff in the air makes things fade into the colors. So if you look in the background of the gingerbread man, you'll notice the trees way off in the distance are starting to take on a little bit of the yellow. In fact, the highlights of it are blending with the sky because it's mixing with the atmosphere. You kind of see this in the Frosty and the Snowman, and in the Peter and the Wolf, you completely see it. I mean, the horizon line actually doesn't even exist. It's really just a blending of the ground and the sky as a result of it. And then finally, just for backgrounds, you can really add a lot of mood and expression. You'll notice that a lot in Golden Books. On the left-hand side, we have the country mouse and the city mouse. Super simple background, but the colors still help to kind of frame the story and the mood of the story. And Walt Disney's Seven Dwarfs Little Golden Book, again, you get this sense of a dark forest and these dwarfs, that live in it. So that was something that was interesting to me, is that you really can tell a lot of the story through the way you work with color and backgrounds. Okay, so without further ado, let's jump back to modern day recreations of Little Golden Books. So you can see Brad's here. 1 second.
Oh yeah, I have to jump into it, right?
Yeah, yes you do.
Are you toggling back and forth?
Yeah, I just toggled off so you can share again.
Okay. Gotta go back and do it again. I will say this is still nicer than that other program that we were using, we were going to use. I feel like this is a lot nicer.
Yeah, well, especially the Procreate. Okay. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, Procreate is so much easier with this. Okay, so backgrounds. I know a lot of you have questions about backgrounds. I do too, honestly. That's one of the ones that's one of the harder ones for me, because I think a lot of us will go in and feel comfortable just drawing a character with a white background or a single color background. Maybe put like a little drop shadow under them. But backgrounds are really tricky because you have to have like, you can decide what level of detail you want, but if you want to have like a full busy scene, you want to show a lot of different elements, it's really hard. It's really hard it's a balancing act, really, and it's hard to, things fighting for attention, trying to create that visual hierarchy, still tell a story without things getting lost. I mean, so with, trying to think of the best way to show you here. I'll just show you with on mine. Now that he's showing you the example, I'm going to show you with this final piece right here that well, it's not final. I'm still working on touching it up. I didn't quite finish it. But if you just look in the background here with the atmosphere, so he'd already pointed this out before. He had that atmospheric perspective. So but aside from that, so you see it blending into the sky. That gives you a sense of distance, so it'll make it so that this feels up close. So we have the cat up close, and then we have that whole like sprawling scene behind it, just by doing that, by putting that atmospheric perspective in there. But also just having it lighter and less detailed is it shows not only like the priority where it is. It's like the cat's obviously more important to this scene than that, but it also helps it set back because it's not so busy and you're not trying to define what it is. It's just there, which is fine. And so I think a lot of us, when we're creating these, we tend to put too much detail on the wrong layers. We'll put a lot of detail into the background. I wish I had a bad example, Dustin. If you don't look for one that maybe has like on Pinterest that has like a ton of stuff going on where it doesn't feel like there's much of a hierarchy. I mean, backgrounds are so different too, because I know a lot of you guys wanted to do more of a just like a shape, like a gestural background. It wasn't a whole lot of detail, and that's fine too. You can totally go that route. It's definitely harder when you start doing a full scene like this, and that's why I tried to show it off, just see if I could kind of prove the point a little bit better and have some visual indicators. So even right here on even right here with the castle and this wagon, it still doesn't have a ton of detail. It has enough on there, but it doesn't have as much detail as this cat. I tried to add little lines for the fur and all that stuff to make sure that it came forward. I didn't want it being sit in the back. And also another way you can make that, but another way that you can kind of control the mood and everything of this background is with your colors. So if you're trying to, I know that we're going to talk about contrast a little bit later, so I want to hold off and not dive too deep into this. But jumping into, but having that background right here, you kind of have layers. This is less, when I say this, I'm going to put a new layer so I can actually draw it. I've realized I don't have like a cursor, and I keep acting like I have a cursor here. So I'm going to do it in like bright pink. Let's see. There we are. So if we're looking in the back, like this section right here is clearly off in the distance. This one has slightly more, this part right here has slightly more detail, and this one has the most detail. But a lot of you guys just created things, like even if it was just like a little swash behind it, that's fine, as long as you're just trying. You just have to make sure that the background doesn't take over. That's big. That's really the biggest thing. Just look at it and see how much. Like if you have to look at a million different little like elements, like if I added some shading out here and like little individual grass, you wouldn't see that anyways from this distance. But also, it's just going to make it something that your eyes are going to tend to gravitate towards, and it's going to take away from your main character. So think about your backgrounds as secondary element, unless you want it to be. I know some of Mary Blair's that we'll see later. You'll be like, wait, but she also messed with scale, and that was a little bit different, and it's a little more graphic. But yeah, that's the biggest thing with backgrounds is just make sure that there's a clear differentiation between the figure and the background. That can be color, that can be contrast, like value contrast, that could be shape, that could be size, it could be whatever. But there just needs to be a clear differentiator. All right, Dustin.
Sorry, I was distracted looking for that example. I found it and then.
No, it's all right. Before I beat it into the ground, we're going to talk. The more we talk about this, a lot of this, we're going to cover. Everything I'm trying to talk about now is going to be covered later. So let's keep going.
Okay, cool. Perfecto. Okay, hold on a second.
Wait, can I share my screen really quick? Or not my screen. Sorry, I'm going to stop sharing this. Can you see just me?
Yep.
Everybody see me? Okay, I'm going to show you this. A good example. So I have this book, and I'll give you a. Okay, I don't know how clear this is, but do you see this at the? Wait, I'll scoot back a little bit. Do you see this at the bottom here? You see the 3 different thumbnails? This one right here on the far side, you can tell that the figure is clearly, set apart from the background, whereas the other one has so much information going on that you can't tell. That's a perfect example of how to, just like showing that you need to have that separate and how to do it. Less detail, less lines, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, perfect.
And this is the book. So I don't know if we put it in our resources page, but we will. It's called Writing with Pictures. It has been one of my go-to children's book illustration Bible. It's kind of cerebral. It's a little heavy, but if you can go through and use it as like a guide, it's like a reference guide. So going back, you don't have to read straight through it. I tried. I almost did it all. It gets a little dry, but there's some really, really good lessons to be learned in there, and lots and lots and lots of examples, which I do better with visuals. So check out the book. It's on Amazon. We'll put it in a link. Writing with Pictures by Uri Shulevitz. That's probably not how you pronounce it, but there you go. There you go.
Okay, so next thing we're talking about is dynamic color palettes. So I think overall, wouldn't you say, I think we felt like everyone had pretty great color palettes, but there was just some tips that we thought could help you out. So one was to layer color to add interest and texture. Something, and I didn't know this, I actually do this too when I illustrate stuff. Something Brad had pointed out was that oftentimes when people were shading, they might just get a darker version of the same hue and use it to shade. But if you notice, for instance, in this 3 bears one, for instance, on her dress, the pinks are just blatantly different pink colors, which makes them stand out more. Same thing with the blue on the pants or the fur in particular. It's literally a different hue. It's a different color. So that makes it stand out more when it's shading. And I'll show you some examples of some other stuff. So injecting one random color to add interest. And Brad, it's funny, I remember you doing this when I first took one of your classes on Skillshare, literally 7 years ago. I remember you mentioning this. So this is obviously one of the most famous Little Golden Books by Mary Blair. And you can look at it and say, oh, wow, if you saw that puke green color by itself, you'd probably think that will not be good in anything. But when it's added into the context of this illustration, it's amazing. It makes everything else stand out. It makes everything more visually interesting and pulls your eye in. And if you look at a lot of Brad's work, or even if you look at a lot of different Golden Books, you'll notice that there'll be a surprising color thrown in there. So in this case, that puke green, or someone told me I should call it avocado green because that's just a better way to describe it.
That's an old avocado. That's one avocado's been sitting out for a while.
Yeah, totally. Another cool way to add more dynamics to your color palette is to start with limited harmonious palettes and then expand. So you can kind of look at this Alice in Wonderland and see that there's a yellow, a green, a blue, and then off of that, a larger palette was built out. So that's another way to start. It can feel overwhelming when you see a lot of colors all at once. You say, oh my gosh, how did they pick, like here, it's not even all the colors. And we have, 5, 6, 7, 8. How they pick 8 or 10 colors. It starts with a few colors, and then it's expanded out from those base colors.
And I'm going to show them how to do that after this.
Cool. And then last, have a big gap between lights and darks, so your palette is more flexible. This was a really big one. I think when we were looking, we noticed in the submissions, this was something that wasn't done a ton. But the more you can create a large, I guess gap between the light and dark colors, the more freedom you have to work with without things blending together or without having color issues as you're working where things start to mix together. So that's it for that. And now we will go back to the future to Brad's little golden book.
Yeah. So thanks for this. I'm excited to go over color because I noticed a lot of you actually, I wasn't worried, but I was curious if, let's see if I can, oh, it won't let me. I'll have to do it this way first. Hold on. That's not sharing yet, is it? Here we go. Zoom. There we go. Yeah, I was kind of worried. I was like, because I know a lot of people have questions about color, so I was like, oh no, like is it when I was pulling up all of your guys' submissions. I was like, oh, is there gonna be tons of bad color combos, and it's gonna be really hard. But you guys actually had a ton of most all of you, I would say, had good color, harmonious color palettes. I think I said that in a bunch of the feedback. It was. It all felt like it was part of the same family, which is a hard thing to do sometimes for people. So props to you for doing that and making it feel like they're all part of the same family. Now you want to take it a step further, and I noticed but it was almost feeling like too close to family. Like there wasn't enough variation, and that's a lot of times has to do with the value of that hue. So whatever color it is, there wasn't very many variations. It wasn't dark enough. Sometimes you do the middle hues, or you try to do just slightly different values. That's okay if you're doing one thing. For example, I'm going to stop talking about it and just show you. Let's say we have, so I'm using all this stuff that I did, both illustrations actually, the Johnny Appleseed and the Puss in Boots was all done with this kit that you guys have, the same brushes you have. So the fat ink one, this is what I use to do most of my main big shapes or flat shapes. It's just the one that doesn't have a lot of texture on the side. And the cool thing about the new Procreate is if you hold it, it'll guess what that shape is and it'll clean it up for you. That's probably the most amazing thing, because before you could just drag a line and hold it and it would give you a straight line, which was amazing. And I wish Photoshop did that. But if you're making different shapes, it'll just kind of guess what it is, and it'll straighten out lines. So that's pretty awesome. Anyway, that's just a little random tip. So let's just say the one thing that you can do with the different values is, let's say it was a green. Let's do it with an orange. Let's say there's an orange here. I'm going to do a circle here, or an oval. Sure. I'm going to click in, if you tap and drag, it'll fill in that area for you. So I'm going to just fill in the rest of this. So if I wanted to make this just feel a little bit more interesting, you can do the gouache butter or the carbon tab. Do the carbon tab really large for this, and then just kind of move down the scale a little bit. However you have, there's lots of different ways to do this. I could go and I can move it down and make it a little bit lighter. Usually I just try to make it just a slightly different value. And maybe sometimes I'll even bring in try to slide it more towards red or more towards yellow, but play just a little bit, just seeing that. And then if you go in here, you'll notice it's not a huge difference. I don't know if you can tell even on there. I'm going to do, if I want to just color in that area, I can do this alpha lock here for a second, and it'll just color in the area. So I don't know, can you even see there's a difference in color?
It's pretty subtle. It's pretty subtle, but it might be the screen. But hey, also, can you back up for a second? I think there's probably some people here that aren't familiar with what an alpha lock is. Can you explain what an alpha lock is?
Yeah, alpha lock just locks the pixels. It's the same as Photoshop that we talked about last time. It just locks the current pixel. So I can't, let's see if I did a darker color. I can't draw outside of the pixels that are in this layer. So all the white, everything that I haven't drawn isn't considered a pixel, so I can't draw on it. I can only draw on the pixel. So that's basically locking the pixels like in Photoshop, the same thing, alpha lock.
How did you do that again? Sorry, I'm not trying to slow you down. I just want to make sure. I feel like people will be like, how do you do that?
Okay, tap on colors, or tap on your layers. This specific layer, and then you have on the left here, you can go click on alpha lock. You can lock it around. Another thing you can do with it, though, that they just added was clipping mask. You just add another layer above it, and then you tap on it and and then click clipping mask, and then it'll automatically make a clipping mask of the layer beneath it. So now when I do, it's the same thing, but it's not touching. It has nothing to do with that original layer. So
just so you guys know, on the resource page, we address that as well. So there's a video tutorial specifically going into the clipping masks, not the alpha locks, but clipping masks.
Yeah, it does not have that. Yeah, it's the same. It's just called something different in Procreate. It's pretty much, it's the same thing. This is clipping mask, which I do in Photoshop, and then alpha lock is like locking transparent pixels is what that is. It's like a little key. It's just like a little lock on in Photoshop. But anyways, if I'm going to go and I'm going to keep adding more colors, so if I tap on it and hold it, it'll pick up the color. Maybe want to go add some more reds in here. So what oh crap, it's on the wrong layer. I'm going to add, can I do it on here? Oh, it's not on, that's why. Let's do this, just to be quicker. So yeah, so now I'm gonna maybe I want a little bit more reds in here. And the idea isn't really to do shading. That's not my purpose right here. It's just to make it feel like it's not completely flat. It just adds a little bit more interest to it. And you might even start add a little bit more of and what I'm doing is I'm just barely tapping on I'm just tapping and wiping on the screen. I'm not like holding it. If I held it down, it'd be solid. But I can get a lot of that texture if I just tap on the screen and add those things. So a lot of times when I'm doing, and you'll notice, and I'll show you right here, if you're looking at the final art, that's exactly what I'm doing here. I end up using it for shading on the castle. But if you look at just other areas, it's just
like his hat. It's kind of shading on his hat when you see it, but
a little bit, yeah.
So to reiterate, it's kind of like if you're actually using a brush, no matter how much you mix up your paints, as the brush changes angle, you might get a little more of a certain color. The intention isn't to try to make that. It just is something that happens, and it creates an authenticity to it. It's not to try to stand out dramatically.
Yeah, no, and for me, it's just more visually interesting than having a flat shape there. Now, I do have some flat shapes, like right here on his boot. I was tempted to do a lot more detail, or on the this little mouse. It's weird seeing it so big and up close, but yeah, this little mouse, you don't need to put a lot of detail there. The more detail I put, the more muddied up it gets. So, I think do we address that later? I think we do. So I won't jump into that right now, but I know people had questions about when do I leave things flat? When do I add texture? I think we have a whole texture section coming up. But with the color palette, I just went ahead and you can see what I started with. It wasn't with much. So I'm going to take off this alpha lock, and I'm going to just erase this thing right here. So the colors that I started with were just these guys. That was what I knew I wanted to have as my core colors, and then I expanded off from that. So if I go in here and we'll say, okay, here's the green. Here's the main green that I chose. Maybe that was one. Maybe that was the other one that I went with. Let's just add a green to this. Again, I'm using the gouache for this, or this one right here, the fat ink one. So maybe that was my core color palette, and then I broke off from that and started thinking about, okay, well, if I'm going to use all of these are similar in value. Some of these are similar in value. That yellow is probably a little bit different, and this green and this black are different, a little bit darker. But I felt like I needed a little bit more variation in there. So you can go. And let's say in the yellows, let's say I needed some browns. So I can jump over here and I can start sliding more towards the oranges. If I want to keep it more vibrant and not go straight brown, then I can kind of build it off to the side of here and be like, oh, that looks kind of nice. I guarantee I could use that. But if I used, sometimes you can't even tell the difference when you're looking at it on here. This yellow, this, oh gosh, it's all yellow. my pen's yellow. If this is yellow right over here, and this is yellow, and this is yellow, they're not all the same color, but they feel like they're in the same family. I usually started with this core yellow right here, And then I move the sliders to make it slightly lighter for the background, and then slightly darker here for his belt, and that kind of thing. So start with your core colors, and then you can branch off ever so slightly. Obviously, going to your analogous colors is kind of a nice way, the ones that are right next to it on the color wheel. So you can get more into like the purples over here. If you wanted to go dark, instead of just going straight down and making, here, a better example would be classic, yeah. Instead of just going straight over where it gets grayer, or right over here it gets too dark, a lot of times I'll try to make things darker by going a little bit, keeping it vibrant still, by just going down a little bit, but then also you can move, like add a little bit more purple to it or something like that. Start moving along the side so it's still darker, and you can go and look, it still feels part of it, feels like a darker version, but that is this is way more interesting and nicer looking than if you were to go straight down and add more black into it.
Oh man, dude, I have to be honest with you. So I always did that until we did, like, I remember you mentioning that, but I had like forgotten, and just watching you do it makes me like, oh, it makes it so much more fun. I mean, it just makes it so much more interesting. Literally, even when you just put it on top of the spots, it's more interesting.
I know. Yeah. It's kind of funny how like easy it is, but I do this all the time. Like a lot of times I'll slide over more towards like the purple or the blue or the green. So for the green, like a lot of times when I'm working with blues, I love adding greens in it. But even that, like, it looks so close, but using them together in like look, if I was going like this, and then I was gonna move, like, work that in there, it looks so cool, and it still feels like it's like one color the further you move back. But when you get up a little closer, it just has a lot more texture and detail to it. So in colors, start building up. Yeah, so these are your other, just start building off of the palette you already have. And you can do it the whole time you're working. Like, honestly, when I'm working on this illustration, I'm cheating and adding new colors the whole time. But I make sure if I add a new pink, that I'm basing that pink off the original. Oh gosh, I keep doing that. I'm basing it off of this original, and that pink right there. That pink's going to be over here. If I do pink again, it's going to be the pink on the nose. They might be different pinks if you put them all next to each other, but I'm starting with the same one so that I have some sort of consistency in the color, if that makes sense. It just makes it more dynamic and more interesting, and so I make sure I have the black and the really dark greens and then the dark blues. A lot of you, I noticed that you had stuff up there, and it just felt like you were just one away. Let's see if I could show you. A good example would be this. This is what I saw a lot of, and then I'll be done here, Dustin, with color here. Unless there's any other questions that we want to tackle here. Let's just say like this. I'll see like a shape like this. I'm gonna alpha lock it real quick. I'm gonna do like the gouache butter. The gouache butter is like a cool giant texture. It's not good for detail work, but it is good for overall texture. I saw this. I saw this kind of shading, which is fine. Like, that's okay. Like, adding that kind of shading in there, but seeing that shading then let's just say if you were to put that on something, I'm gonna start with this red again, because let's just say you made the shape. And let's just say that's part of like this bigger shape right here. Let's do this. Try. So now when you do it, I saw a lot of this where you would go, kind of just try to show that it had an edge, just to kind of, because it's hard doing it without an outline, which we'll talk about as well. And then on this part we did, I saw, a lot of like this. But what might be interesting, if this is what I find to be more interesting, and it stands out a whole lot more, is if now I want to go over here and grab this color that we've already created. And look, what if I layered up these colors? So now it's like a little bit, you can definitely tell that this is separate from the other circle. And then I might even go a little bit darker, but I'm kind of doing it in waves, in like different layers, and building it up, as opposed to just going straight at with the dark color right away. But all of a sudden you start seeing that difference between the two shapes, and the whole thing looks way more interesting. And even then you're like, oh, you even have, it's not just reds, now you have like purples in there, and you can even push that a little bit further if you wanted to. You can go more the purple route. And then you can start throwing in little like highlights of purple, which actually make it look kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the contrast, big thing.
We have 1 minute and 30 seconds. You mentioned waves. Sorry, I'm having stutter.
Layers, waves, yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned waves. Can you explain why? Why not just once? Why not just pick a color and just do it just once?
Well, a lot of times it's hard to tell. So if I go back, for me, it's really hard unless maybe you guys are just awesome at this, but you can't really tell the relationship. This goes back to using the value test. Why I use the value test is because by using this, I can kind of tell. Like I even added on here, if I'm on this, let me just go back. This would be a good practice. But like I even noticed like over here, when I started working with the values, I was like putting this back here, and I was like, you know what, it still doesn't stand out as much as I wanted to. So I just wanted to make, or maybe even like, let's see. Yeah, I mean, I felt like I did a pretty good job on this. But the wheel, for example, the wheel in the back of this this cart feel like they're all kind of still blending together too much. So I'll just kind of build up, but that was me building up color already. I already built up my shading. So maybe so if I was going to take this and take it a step further, maybe that's what I'm trying to say, is I would go slightly, I would pick the background what it's at, go slightly darker again, and I would just see what that looks like. And I can, going around it, so I can build it up and start seeing like, okay, now it's getting too close to, this cart. So maybe either I have to go darker to like set the, to make it so the cart looks different, or I have to go lighter. But you just keep adding those colors in layers, and you can tell. So maybe it just means I need to make the wheel of the cart darker, and that maybe that's the solution. So then I'll kind of go like this. I'm like, oh, okay, now it stands out from the background a little bit. So that's one reason why I layer, is because I constantly have to go back, and I'm like, even this back, I want this to be a little bit darker so it feels a little bit more dimensional. So then I'll go back and I'll just go a step darker and kind of let it blend in, kind of make your own gradient and try to make it blend in. And it feels even, the more contrast, the more it feels more dimensional it feels, the more drastic that curve will be.
Gotcha.
And on his hat too, the same thing. If it's flat, that's another reason why I use it, because sometimes I'm like, it just looks boring having a flat shape there. So then I'll go in and I'll add just like a little variation in it. And even if it's not really a shading technique, or highlighting or anything like that, sometimes it just looks more interesting. Like that even looks more interesting than just what it was to me.
I agree. Yeah, super smart. Awesome.
Yeah.
Are you okay with moving on?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Let's go. Let's keep going.
Okay, so this is one of the most coolest parts for me. This is defining shapes and edges. What's neat about this is I feel like this really is, the parts previous to this are definitely part of mid-century or Little Golden Book illustrations, but this really stood out to me as something that really gives something that mid-century Little Golden Books illustration feel. So part of defining shapes and edges is shading on flat shapes. So if you look at these cats, Brad had pointed out to me, these are really just geometric shapes. I mean, they are geographic, they're somewhere, but they're geometric shapes, and then they basically just added shading to those. So by adding the shading, it's creating depth, but that's something that you particularly see in this style. And I think even, having kids, when I go to the bookstore and I see something that's built out of these types of geometric shapes like this, and then shaded, it's almost this subconscious signal to like your brain about being young. It has a nostalgia about it that you don't even know where it's coming from. And then the second thing about defining shapes and edges is illustrating without an outline. So I think we talked about this in the first session. There's a big urge to put a black line around everything you draw, and you can see here that they've built up they've built up the characters massively compared to the background. So it just stands out, not only in color, but just you can see there's so many layers on there. You can almost sense the feeling of multiple layers of paint as opposed to the background, which was almost looks just finessed. So that's something that's very, very much Little Golden Books. Wouldn't you agree on these 2 points, Brad?
Yeah. And that really reiterates what we've just been talking about with color even, and the little we've gone over with contrast. But yeah, that's also something that everybody's been, a lot of people had a question with, you know, we're saying like, oh, I feel way more comfortable like just outlining everything and then putting the color in it. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying that that's not, that is the comic books are, right? And there's the time and everything for it. If you just want to do it without outlines, it's a little bit trickier, and that's kind of why I did things without outlines. And a lot of times in these Little Golden Books, a lot of them I found didn't have it. So I thought that'd be something that maybe we want to tackle and explain how to do, because it's easier to do it with an outline because you can just fill it in, and you don't really have to find ways to solve problems to make sure like an arm laying on top of its body is. Maybe if it's like you're wearing like a red sweatshirt and you have like the sweatshirt arm is red, how do you make it stand out? Well, if you have lines, it's really easy. The contour lines make it really easy. But if you don't, then you have to do that with values and color, layers of color, just like on this one, the Peter and the Wolf. Look at his body, like how it's just the shading is a lot more drastic because it has to be to stand out. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to tell. Now, in real life, it might look like it's more, it would not, maybe the lighting wouldn't be that drastic, but you have to kind of cheat it and make it a little more drastic so that it does pop off for what you're trying to, like, so you can tell the difference. And so, like, just looking at his arm on his shirt, the same thing as red little shirt. They put, like, almost a black line just with the shading. It got so dark, it's black under there to set it off and just make it so visually you can tell, you can read what that is. A lot of the stuff that was turned in, I felt like, was like beautifully done, great colors, great shading. They just needed to go like 2 steps further with the values, making it darker and darker to get it so that it actually popped off a little bit more. And that's really indicative of the mid-century style, is they would push that saturation, the darker values for that contrast quite a bit.
Loving it. Okay, so stop sharing. So hey, how are you guys finding this? We thought that going back and forth from the past to the future would be like interesting. One thing people said is, well, I want more tying in of, you know, the Golden Books and the mid-century to what's happening now. So we're trying to do a back and forth between here's the past, here's this happening in real life with Brad, who may or may not be from the past, doing it. Is this working for you guys? Cool. Okay.
Sounds like it is.
Okay, this is great.
Good. This easier to follow on. Yeah, that was the main purpose. That's the lesson we learned from the last one. This being our very first, you know, masterclass, online live masterclass, we're learning a ton. And this is probably the biggest thing, is making it just clearer and having these PDFs and sticking with the timeline. So thanks for sticking with us, those who have. And this is, I'm glad you guys are liking the structure. It's nicer. It's easier for us too. I think we were trying to think we could do it on our own without being too structured, but I feel like the structure is definitely necessary. Oh, yeah, there's my dog. There's another one in here somewhere. She's sleeping over there. Well,
that's great. Awesome. Okay, so now we're going. So now we're on your examples of shapes and defining shapes and edges.
Yes, and next time what we should do next time, Dustin, is like asking. We should like maybe ask people that where we found like, say like, don't be offended, but like this is the problem. Like this is the question that you had, and you know you're like, how do I take this to the next level or whatever? Like my shading isn't like all the way there. How do I get? I wish we could use the people's examples from like the project submitted. We should probably get like clearance beforehand. You know, like talk to them and see if they'd be willing to do that. Because that would be really cool, because I could show you exactly what I mean. There's some really good examples of just like it was a cool illustration. You just need to like take 2 steps further and it would be amazing. But anyways.
Yeah, we've definitely learned a lot for sure.
But next time. Yeah, we're learning a lot. This is fun. Everybody's saying they'd be fine with this. I'll get permission. We'll get permission next time. I don't want to try to guess and things right now and slow us down. But okay, so defining shapes and edges. Couple different things. I think we also talked about shading on flat shapes, illustrating without an outline, contour lines. Is this the one where you also? I don't think we have a slide for this, but adding a textured edge. Is that in the texture section? Oh yeah. That's the next section. Okay, I just want to make sure I wasn't gonna touch on that right now. Okay, shading on flat shapes. This one is a, let me share my screen here. I keep forgetting I have to do this. I keep talking and I'm pointing to my screen like you guys know.
Whoa, sorry.
Oh, no, it went to my Apple TV. No.
Who knows what's on it?
I don't know. It's probably going to go live for my wife in the other room with the kids on the Apple TV. Let's see. They'll be getting a lesson. So the flat shapes, that was like the hard one because a lot of times, so I'll do a lot of it vector work, bringing vectors in Procreate I don't. But how I do start a lot of my illustrations, I'll just show you a little quick. I'll take my final sketch and I'll show you what I do when I start in this next section. Let's see, like the next step from here. So my final sketch, I'll go up one more. I'll keep my colors handy, except for I'll get rid of these ones. Let's see. Oops. I'll get rid of these ones right here. Okay, so what I'll try to do is start blocking out like my main shapes. And you can do this, like I said, in Illustrator. If you're working in Photoshop, like sometimes I'll do this in Illustrator first and block out my main shapes, and then I'll go back and then I'll add the textures and stuff like that. But basically, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go in here and just create my flat shapes. Now you don't have to. The answer is you don't have to fill in. So people ask like, okay, how do I know the balance between adding texture in areas and not? It really just comes down to your preference and how busy you need that area to look. If you want to add some, I think, is this later? Is there another? I think there's one more slide. Where's the slide with the zoo? Is that next?
Yeah, that's coming up.
Oh, okay. Add texture. I'm going to keep it flat. Okay, so I won't say that. Shading on flat shapes. Okay, yeah. I'll stop what I'm saying now. We'll tackle that right next because we have a good example of that. But what I'll do is I'll have the shapes that I'll make first, and then I'll go and I'll have another layer, and I'll start. Let's just say I'll do a pink color. This pink, and I don't have to have the colors exact. I just kind of guess what colors I'm going to want this to be. I'll try to lock it in as best as possible. As I start adding more colors, I'll start seeing what values I need. So I'm like, okay, I need a light color here, so it can't be like one of my real greens, and I already have like a green background. So then I'll just, once I have these shapes, because then I can go in like do what I was talking about. I can do the alpha lock, and I can go in and do my coloring techniques. You know, I can go in there, but I can do it with like this, my gouache butter brush, which is big, and I can go in there and start texturing later. But first, I go in and block out all my shapes. The color, can you go back? Oh, I guess you can't show yours. The example of the color kittens I thought was really good, because sometimes, you know, it's like you can have all these like really flat shapes, and you don't have, not every single one has to be full, but when you're doing some shading, there's a couple different ways that we'd already talked about, which was, if this is alpha locked, you could go a slight shade different. Use like the gouache butter or maybe even the big gouache. Yeah, the big gouache, and kind of just go along the edges to kind of give it a little bit of dimension. I saw a lot of you guys doing that, and that's fine. But it almost gives it like, it makes it feel like an equal. It should be like it makes it feel like every part of this, because I equally shaded this whole side. It feels like the whole thing is like one big rubber, or one big solid shape because if it's gonna, I'm trying to figure out how to explain that. It looks different than if like I had individual highlights. So let's see. Let me show you the opposite one.
I think that rubber thing almost makes sense though, because it feels like this plastic thing that's almost like a 3D like rendering. It's just like two.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, because it doesn't define all the little edges and things like that. Because naturally, the light wouldn't be even. It wouldn't be all dark on one side. It wouldn't be all like evenly dark like this. That makes it just look like, you know what I mean? Like it wouldn't work like that. What it would do is like you'd have like maybe like little parts here, and then like you'd have like another little strand, like these little feathers. Maybe you'd have some darker ones under here, and then it would, you know what I mean? Like it would be different. So you just kind of have to think of what you want it to be. That would be saved for this guy right here.
It almost feels like you can sense the like relaxation in the strokes, I think, when it's not so rigid along the edge.
Yeah.
It feels more spontaneous.
Yeah, I think, but it also like defines the shape a little bit better. It gives you a little bit, it doesn't feel like one big blob. I think a lot of times what we do is we'll go on there and we'll just think, oh, we're just shading because we're shading. Now, I'm not saying that because this is like a children's book. I don't feel like you have to have like the exact proper shading unless that's what you're trying to achieve, but you don't really need it. In a lot of these like, what are they, more graphic illustrations? But just, I mean, even like having that looks a little bit more like there's just a little more volume, and then like if that was behind it, you can do that. But I feel like a lot of us will just do they won't even do that. They'll just keep it even all the way across, like this, like on one side, and then we'll like that just isn't very interesting. Like that shape, it doesn't feel like a real object. So if you're gonna do it, you just try to be a little bit more random with it if you're going to do that. Because even that, I don't even know. I just put some few strokes on there, and all of a sudden it feels like there's more volume to it. And
Man,
then like,
oh, sorry.
Sorry, go ahead. What were you saying?
I was just going to say, like what's interesting is this is the same as the color in the sense that it's almost about giving permission to break rules, because like our brain, like my brain tells me, oh, it should be like the same shade, just darker. Oh, it should just shade along an edge. But it's almost like instead of imposing rules, you're kind of saying, hey, don't follow that. Like, don't feel like you're this pressure to follow that rule or that instinct that your brain is telling you.
Yeah.
I did want to follow up on something because I just can't imagine how you're doing this. You had mentioned when you started to draw the feather on top of his hat that you said, well, it has to be a lighter color because there's just going to be this green in the background.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Do you remember when you mentioned that?
Yeah, so, I was going to have a light, yeah.
So I'm picturing myself like doing this, and I'm thinking it's like chess. Like, I mean, you would have to be thinking really far ahead. Do you do a really, really rough sketch of colors on top to kind of see what's going to happen when I do this? Because I can picture someone who's like, oh man, that looks killer. Then they realize, well, now I've got myself into a conundrum because
no, this is it. This is it. I can kind of tell them, look, I already noticed the problem that I was having in the value test. So you can see that it blends in with the background, and it wasn't. So either I can keep it. It's okay if I don't. It's not like the big focal point, but the fact that it runs over boots, over the words, gives you a sense of where it's at. It's in front, right? So I didn't feel like I had to, because here's the final again.
Okay, that makes sense.
So I initially thought I was going to do it green, so I ended up going yellow, and that's why I misspoke. But what the main thing is like when you're looking at it, I added a little bit more like these little curly cues, these little details, just to make it stand out a little bit more. But it's already standing out from the background because of where it's at. It's in front of the type, right? Like Puss in Boots is in front of the castle, and it's between the cat, and you can tell it's between the cat because I put the big plume right there. So you're forcing these layers. Yeah. What?
I know you had a variety of shades, and you kind of referenced that, and I can see how looking at that first would help to solve 80% of these problems. Do you find that sometimes a decision on the color changes because you realize, oh, this one was not accounted for, therefore it's going to be more yellow than green, or some sort of surprise like that happens and that's built into the illustration? Or do you feel like everything goes as planned?
No, never goes as planned. Absolutely never. No, the thing is like I didn't know his hat was going to be green. I never knew that. I actually thought it was going to be white. But the more I did it, the more I was like, oh, it just takes up way too much away from the face. If I made that white, it'd be kind of cool. But I felt like for me, it took away too much from the face details, in which I felt like you should look at the face first. That's where I put the most detail. That's where I wanted you to, that's the focal point. I wanted you to look there. So I tried to tone it back, and I was like, well, the green will kind of pull back and pull out of those yellows, which would be kind of nice. So it's not just straight blue and yellow and red. The green's kind of pulled in from the trees and stuff like that. So I felt like that would work. But yeah, it never goes this bad. And you can also do this value test. You can do that with colors next. Like you can go through here and maybe you go like knock it back a little bit. Do another. Oh, I have maximum layers reached. Let's do this. That's the worst. So you'll notice a lot of these things are together. It's because I've reached the maximum amount of layers that I could do. But yeah, you could go in here and if you wanted to, you can just start blocking out certain areas. Like, okay, I wanted that background to be yellow. So, gosh dang it. Why is that? Oh, there we go. Is that on front? Oh, here it is. Here we go. So maybe I'll just go in and where's that final sketch? Oh, is it down there? For some reason, oh, the grayscale side. I'm just gonna swap this. There you go. So you can go in here and you can just like drop in your colors really quickly and just kind of get an idea of what those going to be. So I'm like, oh, I know we're close sometimes. So if that's going to be blue, I'm like, okay, my blues are going to be over here. And I'm like, I want to keep that blue going over here. And you can map it out just the same way with the value. You can do that with colors, and you can solve a lot of your issues that way. Because you're like, okay, well, I like that yellow. I'm going to pull it back in. I'm going to pull it back in.
As someone with anxiety issues, this is massively reassuring to like think of doing something like this beforehand.
Yeah, it shouldn't be. Yeah, it's not. I don't know. There's not. Mine, it looks ugly before it looks good. So, like, I can just say, okay, my green's going to be in there. So when I take this off, you can see kind of where all the colors are going to lie. I'm like, okay, well, if that background is going to be that color, I want to do pinks for the plume or whatever. And so the pink's going to go right here. You can do this test beforehand, and then when you take it out, you're like, okay, some of these colors aren't working really well together. So this background, for example, needs to be lighter. I think that needs to be lighter. And then you're like, oh, now I'm running into some issues. Now my plume isn't working out. So it's like, maybe I need to throw in that red color a little bit more and just kind of like, maybe that will be kind of what I put as like a little shading. A little bit of it, and if you look at the final, you can see that's what I did. I added the shading or the darker red down here because it needed to stand off from this like puke color that we talked about before. Mm-hmm. And then yeah, so I just sometimes the shading or whatever, or like the mixing of colors, the layering of color, also sets it up because it's between two different colors. On a light background right here, or it's on a light. Dang, how many times have I done that today? Let's do like right here. So the light background right here, and then it's going to have to mix over a dark one, but it's the same color. So you're running into an issue of like, it'll look different on different colors, right? It'll blend in too much. So then I had to make this kind of two-tone. You'll notice that the red kind of stops right there, and then it goes pink because that's what I needed it to do. Not necessarily, and it just kind of worked out that I could kind of pass the shading, but that's the main reason was because I had it over two different values.
Oh. Wow.
Does that make sense? Was that really confusing, or was that clear?
That made sense.
Colors are weird.
A little mind blowing that you thought of that, but yeah.
Well, colors are weird because the same color can look different with the it can look completely different on a different color. So if I put this blue right here, this blue right here, it takes on different. It pulls from its background. Like if if I had this color, for example, I'm trying to find a good way to show this. Let's see. If I had a gray background, so this is the background. Let's do this. Gray over here, and then a white over here, and I had like this. Let's just say it was this little mint green color. the color looks, it just takes on a different feeling when it's on a different color. And so when you play around with them, I guess I can give a better example than that if I planned it out better. But colors do look different on different colors, so you have to be careful when you're making it that it's not going to look the same on one other color.
Well, and like Bill had mentioned in the comments that how big a color is too can have a big impact on how it's perceived.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Cool. Are you comfortable with moving forward?
I think so. Yeah, let's go.
Okay, cool.
And again, we're not answering a ton of questions like we normally. Last time we answered like every question we saw during the presentation. We're not doing that this time. We're going to be doing that at the end for a little bit and trying just so we can get through all the content and make sure everybody feels like they got what they needed. And then afterwards, if you still have a question about any that we ignored in the chat, we didn't ignore it, we saw it, but just ask us again in the end.
Totally, yeah. We're not trying to ignore you. We had just gotten some feedback on the first one that it felt too chatty, and I think maybe that slowed it down, and we want to make sure it felt like we want to make sure we're respecting everyone's time, and then when we do the Q&A at the end, that way everyone can walk away knowing we hit on everything, and then we get into those Q&As more.
Yeah, because there's some really good questions. I'm liking the questions like, where did you learn this and that kind of stuff. That's perfect to talk about at the end. So hold on, I'm looking at you like Timothy and I think a few other people were. I think Elise was saying some things. So
yeah, there was like 3 times I almost started getting when I was like, no, we must stick to the schedule.
We're gonna get through this. This is organized. This is us being disciplined.
It is trying our damnedest to be disciplined.
It's hard.
Darndest, damnedest, whatever. Okay, so 5 is applying patterns and textures. This is another one that I feel, I mean, of course you see these things all over the place, but I feel like this really started to pop up in little golden books. And I want to bring this up. This is a little bit of like a side note on this, but it's fascinating. And I don't know if you knew this, Brad.
Oh, sorry. Finish what you're going to say, and then I want to go back and do one thing real quick for them.
Okay, well, this is just like a little nugget fun fact about this that I think is kind of inspiring. So when the concept for Little Golden Books was made, obviously these people are capitalists and they're trying to make as much money as they could and find a new market to make money selling books. But what they noticed was that blue-collar families and maybe like lower middle-class families couldn't afford to buy as many books because these are loose numbers, but I believe like books cost something like $1 or something like that. And what they realized was if instead of doing a run of 25,000 books, if we do a run of 100,000 books, the cost drops, obviously. Because costs always drop when I can't remember what you call it, a scale of something. Anyways, so the cost drops. So they could all of a sudden sell these things for 25 cents as opposed to $1 when you create 4 times as many books and you're able to sell it to a larger market. And I just thought that was cool because it kind of helps you realize that this whole kind of art form that's influenced by this was based off of working within these restrictions so they could put these books into, corner drugstores and places where people wouldn't normally be able to buy books. And then they doubled down and reinvested their efforts into getting really great artists to do the illustrations. That was a little bit of a random thing, but I thought it was just fascinating to hear that that's how they solved a problem. So go ahead, and then I'll get into this applying patterns and textures.
Yeah, I just forgot one thing. I noticed this is just a little. Let me share my screen one last time, or
Sure.
not one last time, just real quick.
Yeah.
This is the last time tonight I'm sharing my screen. You have to talk the rest of the time. Just kidding. Let's see.
Economies of scale. That's what I was thinking.
Oh yeah. Yep. Okay, so if you'll notice that, so we talked about, these are just a couple things you hit on in the defining shapes and edges, like illustrating without an outline. I don't have an outline on here. It would be really handy if I had outlines for, let me show you. You could probably guess which part I would have loved to have outlines on. It was this guy. Whoa, that's a huge breath. This guy. Look, it's so hard to get. I mean, luckily it's not like a focal point, so I was less worried about it like really having crazy value changes. I'm still working on it, so it probably will. But just having like lines on this thing would have been so much easier. I mean, look at you wouldn't have any problem defining that shape or knowing what's there. Especially since this little wagon is the similar color. I could make this a darker brown. I just didn't want it to blend in too much with this blue. It would be kind of hard to set off from the blue, so I had to be lighter. Just the issues that you run into. So some things that I'll do, and I'll probably end up adding this later on here, is if you use your, like the brush that we have in here, the dry gouache is a really good one for this. I went in and, like, you can notice on the hat here on the plume that I didn't outline the whole thing, but I did feel like it needed that much of an outline. And you can tell, I think it's right here. Oops. Yeah, just didn't stand, like it does stand out by itself, but by adding that little bit extra on there, I'll show you kind of as a whole. You can I'll toggle between it again. It just defines enough of the shape. Like I didn't have to do a whole lot of shading on this hat right here because of it, which I didn't want to. I like the colors that I chose. So instead of like doing a crazy value shift, all I had to do was do a tiny hint of a contour line just to define that part. I didn't have to go and do this whole hat. I think that'd be way heavy-handed and draw like way too much attention to an area I don't want it to be, where I don't want to draw the attention to. Same thing with the boot right here. I'm probably going to go in and make this even darker with the red, just so it has more contrast back here. I'm not finished, but just adding this little, and sometimes I'll go back and erase the contour lines, but just having them in these like little random spots, even there to show the spot for the, like right here on the mouse. That was super. It's super helpful to like make sure the eye can distinguish between shapes and different objects, different elements. So you can use that contour line sparingly. That's one of the biggest things I picked up from one of my favorite illustrators, Dala of Ipcar. She's amazing, and she uses that technique all the time. And it's for me, it's nice because you don't have to outline the whole thing, but you can use it just to help save the shape, the integrity of a shape at some point, or to make things kind of stand off from something else. Like you could argue that I could do, I could probably add something right here, even a little one right there, even just in blue, just to set it off from the tail, which I'll probably keep that.
Well, and this goes all the way back to the second section that we covered about backgrounds. The only place that you're putting these, black accents is on the main character. The background, you don't see that at all.
No, and if I do, it'll be really subtle. If I do it on like maybe on this wagon, because it's still enough in the forefront that I could, but I'm kind of wary to do it because all of a sudden if I do put a black line over here, oh yeah, I haven't filled in the little ear yet. I need to do that. But yeah, like if I add a black line in there, all of a sudden, even if it's like subtle, right? Mm-hmm. All of a sudden we're looking over there because we see that heavy black line. So I won't do a line. If I did anything, it would be stealing like this color down here and maybe doing like a slight accent with the colors I already have. In your head, are you literally thinking of these darker lines like this, for instance? In your head, do you think of them as a way to draw attention when you're doing it? Do you say, where do I need to draw more attention, or is it more of an organic, random process than that in your brain? Sometimes it's random. It just feels nice. It just looks nice. But most of the time, it's to solve a problem. A lot of times I'm running into an issue like that arm. It's like, how do I make that look separate from the tail? And that's why I did these. That's why I did the cat hairs right there. I did you can do highlights with just. Some people did fur over the entire body, which is kind of a cool look. But if you show a little bit of restraint and hold off and don't put like the hair, like if I did blue little hairs all over the whole body, I wouldn't have that opportunity to do, what do you call it? I wouldn't have the opportunity to do highlights with it and to separate it from this like tail right here. So now I'm just using it just in places that are highlighted. I didn't put it down over here. I just kept it over here where the light may hit it. So it feels a little bit more natural where I placed it. Did I draw on the eyeball there of that cat? Dadgummit. Hold on. Oh, there we go. I went back. But yeah. So it is like you notice I don't put all the little cat fur right here on this guy right here. I kind of left him there because I would assume he's kind of more in the shadows. So I reserved it just to being, it's not really true to where the shadows really would be, but it just helped me have a little bit of extra problem solving tools by just having to be able to so I can separate from the tail and things like that. That's why I didn't do this one going all the way down. I just kept them. I kept it separate. I don't know. It's just maybe over explaining it, but in my head, every time I'm working on an illustration, I feel like I'm just putting a puzzle together.
Cool.
And so maybe I wish it was easier. It came more naturally to me, but it does not. It does not.
That's super helpful. Okay, I'm going to push us forward here.
Yes. Go ahead.
Wait, where did that go? There we go. Okay. So this is applying patterns and textures. And this was one of my favorites. This one, what I was about to say is we had talked like this is super reminiscent of Little Golden Books in that era. Brad had found this one and showed it to me, and this is Child's Garden Verses. And you can see when to add texture and when to keep it flat. And like Brad had pointed out to me, we were talking about this earlier, and he was just pointing out like the trees, right? Like the trees have all these patterns of leaves that are literally patterns, or the chicken. I'm sorry, I'll make this a full page. Or the chicken is like really made of patterns, or you have these patterns going around the edge of the illustration. You have patterns happening on the rooftops. Super reminiscent of this period. And I don't know how you think of these, Brad, but I think of these, not only do they look cool, but they are literally signals to my brain that you're going after a certain feel.
Yeah, sorry, I just realized that I was answering people's questions randomly in the feed, and it was all going to you privately.
Oh, yeah. We can have private chats.
Sorry, that's frustrating because I was like, dang it. Okay.
Yeah, it is something. It is something I've noticed is that in the people that seem to really nail this style, they're very good at putting these types of decorative patterns in. In fact, I even saw a situation, I think with Suzanne, we had seen it where someone had gotten, with Lori, it was with Lori Rudolph, where someone it looked like had gotten a stamp, like they had done a hand-carved rubber stamp or something, and they would stamp the pattern on tops of different parts of the illustrations in the children's book. And it was almost like this super efficient way to add textured patterns to work without having to draw each and every time.
Yeah.
That was our idea, at least, that it was like this way of saving time. But anyways, this is very reminiscent of that period and totally a signal for it. So we're going to jump back to Brad, and he's going to show this.
Keep it there for a second. Keep it there for 1 second. Yeah. Just going off of what you said, I really like it's. So I have that one example. Maybe I'll scan that picture in from Writing with Pictures, the book, and because I know people are like, "Hey, that's blurry." I know because I just off the cuff thought about showing it to you. There's another example. That example had a really there's a really good example on that page as well for what you're talking about. But adding like all those heavy patterns and textures, so that's cool in some art. But when you're trying to tell a story or try to make trying to like have certain things be focal points or whatever. You have to be kind of careful how you use those patterns. But I love how they use just like you look at the pattern, like the geometric type of patterns, like they have in the houses, the rooftops. I love those on the chicken, in the trees. I mean, you could argue, like you could even make like a pattern of what they have in the trees. Like I'm sure I've seen like a wallpaper or a like wrapping paper that's had that pattern, and you could just fill an area, and it all of a sudden feels like full, like really interesting. So. Yes, adding some textures to some flat areas, but if they did it to all the different, like if they did every tree was like that and every character had tons of patterns, it would be super distracting. So you have to be able to take the brush off of there, or stop working on something because sometimes we overdo it. It's easy to overdo it.
It's interesting too because the orange and yellow leaves in the tree at the top also connect in with the buildings in the background, but you don't see them in the front.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot to love about that illustration. This is I don't have a ton to say on this part, but I do have a couple little techniques that I wanted to show you. So let me get it back up here. And I'm trying to reference. I'm trying really hard to reference and think back to when I was giving feedback and all the questions that you guys had, and that's what really stimulated this entire this whole second class was, I just basically went through, and he and I took notes on all the questions that you had, and then after we gave all the feedback, we made sure we tallied up kind of what questions were being asked most, and then that's what dictated what we did here. So in regards to that, one question that I saw pop up several times was how do I know when to, like, going off of this again, like, how do I know when to keep something as a flat shape and whatnot? It's really up to you, but just remember, the more time you add like a ton of texture into something, unless you're going to do like a texture on everything, which can be busy, but if you do the colors right and the contrast right, it can still work. But one thing that I've noticed with the textures is, like, you can, the flat areas, the ones that you don't draw a lot of attention to, the ones that you add all the texture to, if you're going to do, it's just use kind of a balancing act. If you're going to add a lot of texture to something like I did to the face of this cat, everybody's going to start looking at the details in the face, because you're naturally drawn to the more detailed areas because you want to kind of decipher that information. Obviously, it means more if they're going to put more time and effort into it. So that's kind of how I do it. Like, I left some shapes, like even on this belt, I might go back and do stuff, but I didn't really add like a shading texture really or anything on the cat's main body either. He's pretty much just all black because I wanted him to stand out so much. I didn't want to muddy it up by making some lighter values in there. And then on the boots too, they're just like a solid shape. The mouse is a solid shape. You don't need to add it everywhere, because sometimes it's just clear. If I added a lot to that mouse, he's already tiny. It'd be hard. I think it would lose some of the that contrast, and you might lose him, which he's a big part of the story, and that's what I was wanting to get across in this cover. So that's what it is. I don't think there's a real right or wrong answer. That's just thinking of contrast again. But I heard that question a lot. Like, I don't really know which ones to like texture and things. Just keep in mind the contrast. Now, the other thing I noticed that we had when textures was just adding, like having a shape and sometimes we think it feels too perfect. So if you look here on the cat, I did this one I did the whole body. I didn't even do, so most of the shapes I did with, you saw the fat ink brush, and it's a really clean line. If I go here, let's do this. It's a really, gosh, so small. So it's a really clean edge if you want it to be. You can make it a really clean edge. But sometimes that you don't want that look, or if you're bringing in vector shapes, they're just too perfect. For example, if I was to bring in, let's do this. I'm gonna do I have a brush here that I got before we were able to do shapes. There you go. That's a little huge. I have these brushes that are just made for just making shapes. It's kind of handy. But let's just say, like, I have this shape in here, and I wanted the edge to be, it just feels too flat, or the edges feel too crisp. You can cheat it a little bit, because sometimes I like to use the main shape as a guide. I don't know why I chose that color. That's a terrible color. It doesn't stand out at all for this. Let's do this one. Perfect. Okay, so on the edges here, maybe it looks too solid. One way I cheat this, and I know Dustin was like, really, that's like the easiest thing ever when I told him about it. Where is it? It's there in our classes. So you could take, for example, the carbon tab, and now that you have this guide of this perfect circle, just go around the edges. I'm gonna make this even smaller. Go around the edges, and you can make it too small, apparently. Just kind of, even if you just tried to trace the edge, with just going a little bit over the line, all of a sudden you have like this kind of this lightly tap around the edges. It makes it look imperfect, but you're using that as like your base layer. Just having that perfect circle is just a nice guide moving forward and making shapes. So now I can mess up those edges. They don't look quite so perfect, but it's really like a good circle, which is really hard to make in here, especially in like Photoshop and stuff like that. Getting like a good circle with a textured edge. So if I was to try to draw it by myself is what I'm saying, the alternative, it takes a little while. It may not be perfectly circular like you wanted. So this is just a shortcut. It's just a cheater way to do it. Just go around the edges and roughen it up a little bit. Is that clear? Does that make sense? I probably should have done this on a white background so it's even clearer. But yeah, does that make sense to everybody? I can't see the things when I'm sharing, so
Yep,
I'm assuming.
everyone's saying it, or crystal clear. Yes, it makes sense. Yes, good. Definitely. I do that too.
Okay, good. Oh yeah, I should have just done black down here so you could see it. But yeah, the idea is that you just you can add, even if I did it on this shape, I could just add a little bit more to it and just make it look imperfect. And you don't have to do it all the way around. You could just do like some areas, and it just looks a little bit more hand-drawn. But you're cheating because we're using a computer and we can do cool stuff like that, which is awesome. That's why I use a computer, so I can cheat.
Nice. Okay, I'm going to move forward. We are so on top of it. Okay. Let's see here. Okay, so the last part of this is creating contrast and, whoops, oh, I keep forgetting to push play. Creating contrast, and I think the very first thing when we were looking through these, images, the submissions together was, oh my Lord, these are all so amazing. It's like all of a sudden realizing that you're in the midst of a ocean of geniuses. You start thinking back on everything you said. And anyways, I think we were both blown away by how talented everyone was. But the second thing that we had noticed was that there was a common recurrence of the background and the foreground seeming to oftentimes be flattened together almost. And that's why we talked about background first. But again, this is like creating contrast, which to me is a lot about the background and standing out from the background. And in this case, we're talking about darks and lights, and Brad's going to expand with a couple other techniques than just darks and lights. But perfect example here. I mean, you can't even debate that this cat stands out dramatically from the background because of the well thought out use of darker colors and more saturated colors than the background. I'll let you expand on that more. Do you want to expand on this slide, or would you like to expand on the actual illustration?
I'll go and share my screen for a second. And this is just going to be kind of short because I'm realizing now that I put this last on the slides because we really covered contrast all throughout this. I keep saying that because it's like the number one thing that I noticed, but it was also the number one thing that I feel like I'm always aware of when I'm illustrating, and I struggle with, and that's like the part that I'm constantly working on. So it's not just because you guys brought it up a lot. It's just something that's so important that I feel like sets apart your illustrations over like a really good illustration over one that's just like, oh. So another way to think about like your lights and darks, like again, I'm without being too redundant, like you can tell that I want to make sure that the contrast is there. So I made the cat the darkest thing on here, right? I want to make sure he's the darkest, the background is lighter. But also, like, you can do that. And again, I said with detail, he's more detailed, the background's less detailed. Size relationships is another thing, layering. There's all sorts of things you can do to add that contrast or make it feel like it's like a little bit in different space. So for example, I'm going to keep this open and shut this one. So I'm going to make sure I have the right brushes and everything before I start drawing like I did last time. So if you had, like, some ways to think about it is just the contrast could be in your scale, right? You have like something in the background, and like on that one that you just saw, there was a castle, like that's going to be a castle or a factory or a crown, whatever you want to call it. And then you have like the cat kind of jumping over top of it, right? But he was so much bigger, his head was there. It was just like the scale is what kind of set it apart. You kind of thought, oh, he's in the background, or he's less, this is less important. He's the most important. So sometimes you'll find like these really big, these really like the Mary Blair one, the I Can Fly one, she was huge in the middle, and then there's like this whole little landscape full of all these little characters in there, and they all kind of competed with like the same values, I felt like, and then they had like little clouds everywhere. So I felt like that would be super busy if she didn't make that character so much larger, which is another form of contrast. So she didn't have to necessarily do with the lights and darks. She was able to do there, or like, so it's just so you can. So basically, you can do your scale is one way of doing it. You can do it by contrast by just by overlapping some things. That helps. That also just it shows you, like I did with the type on here. Let's see, that I did with the type. You can see that there's overlap. Gosh, I did it again. You can show like where the sensitive space is, but then also you can do just changing the color value of that next to it. So those are just some like really simple techniques to use. So if you're using one and you're like, okay, it's still not working, then try to do the color too. Make one even darker, and this is lighter because it's further back. And then if you need to like push that even further, you can do something. You can have it overlapping that thing, so you know what's in front of it. So there's lots of little tricks and things that you can do with your layout and your composition to really make things feel like they have that contrast in there. So just experiment with that, and that's a lot of the stuff that I did early on. Like I did that early in my my sketching and then my grayscale, trying to figure out what that was going to look like. But yeah, the one thing I didn't ever talk about, and I wanted to tell you real quick because I'm done with that. I feel like I've covered everything that I wanted to cover. One thing that I did, and I'm going to show it to you real quick. When we're making in Procreate, you don't really have the opportunity to work with type. You don't have like a type button, unless they do. If you do, I haven't found one yet, but it'd be awesome when they do incorporate that. But Dustin, tell me if somebody says that exists, because if it does, I'm gonna freaking lose it. Okay. Let's see, in a good way. So what I actually did was I went to my fonts. I'm not proposing you steal fonts like that, but I'm saying like you can build off of one and customize it yourself. Use it as like a skeleton. So you can go and like see the demo mode, and you can what is it called, a pentagram? Is that what it is when you put in your word? Yeah. And you can test it out in all the different fonts. So I do that a lot. And I end up buying it usually if I actually want to use it as is, or I'm going to have like multiple instances. I'll just buy it because usually pretty good prices on there. I'll buy the font, but if I don't, this is just an image that I brought in there, and I would just take different parts of it, and I messed with the scale here. So like I would move that around. Like maybe I want some like the end to be right there. Whatever. I would kind of manipulate it, and then once I did that, I would just I would knock it down, and then I would start drawing over top of it on a different layer. And then I can kind of customize it how I want. So I can use it as like a base. Again, like another, if I wanted to sketch off of it, I could do that. And I can maybe like add my own kind of serifs if I wanted to, or if I wanted to do like more of a blocky
that's so
serif.
Clever. These are my favorite kind of tips because
but you're just
I would have just drawn it straight out. Yeah, like I guess maybe it's cheating a little bit, but like I don't know, like there's better places to invest your time unless it's just a lettering piece, in my opinion. If
you're just gonna copy it and you're gonna use it, I just feel like you want to make it your own anyways. I feel like I tend to want to make it my own anytime I'm working on something, and so you can just by coloring over it, and it makes it kind of look cool because if you want to keep it looking hand drawn, it's kind of cool too. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you can maybe like say, oh, I don't want that. I want it to be a little thicker, and you can make it thicker just by hand, which is nice. I don't know. A lot of these things, like same thing with like color palettes. It's like, yeah, steal a color palette. It's like you're not using it for the same thing. Nobody owns the color palette, so take it, and it's never going to work exactly how you want it. So change it a little bit. Like this type, I'm going to have to scale it down a little bit, make that smaller. I'm going to have to. I want to go in there and I want to add little details. Maybe I want to add. On the final, it's just like this. Like this is one thing I've wanted to do to it still, is like adding even lighter maybe. I wanted to add little details, like maybe like little flowers or something in here, and then have like a cool, you know what I mean? Like, it just makes it look even cooler. But I can do all of that and play it over top of something instead of having to reinvent the wheel. And if I don't feel like I'm a letterer, and I'm going to be creating these letters, you know, just out of my brain, you can pull some of those and use it as like your base layer and then play off of it. That's just a good time saver, and it helps you organize things without having to pay $100 for a font that you're not going to use anyways. Afterwards, you find out you're like, oh crap, I'm not even going to use it. I didn't like that way. And when I played with it, it just didn't work, so I'm going to use a different one.
It's kind of a smart idea too, because like if you look, okay, so I'm on a page of all sorts of, I mean, just you can just Google golden books. I'm on a Pinterest page of golden books, and if you look, almost without exception, no title is just plain. They always add some sort of thing to add visual interest to it, which makes perfect sense from a commercial point of view, because you want to draw them into the face and draw them into the story. You know, we're naturally drawn to the faces, and if you add details to the face, they're going to look at that more. But then you have to draw them into the title too, and that's how you do it. You add like more details. You lift it off the page a little bit with a shadow.
Customize it.
Yeah, and as I'm literally looking at these right now, and I mean, it's very hard to find one that isn't either multiple colors, has decorative things added to it, has a shadow to lift it off the page a bit. Yeah, super important, especially when you're trying to get someone to pick up a book off a bookshelf.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, but I'm just reading everybody else's. Says whenever you use fonts, just remember to check for commercial rights, redraw. Yeah, definitely customize them. If you're going to keep it and use this commercially, I didn't alter it a lot yet, just because I was just really needed to get something out quick for us. I didn't want to buy a font that I wasn't going to use. But agreed. A lot of people are mentioning like, yeah, you need to use. Check commercial rights. All fonts. I just want to put that out there. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm not saying steal the font. I'm just saying like use it as like a base layer, and that's okay to like use it as like the skeleton, and then draw it and customize it how you want for these types of things. I'm not. You want to make it unique and make it your own. It's just I don't think you always need to buy the some of those typefaces if you're not gonna, if you're gonna alter it drastically.
And as someone that sells fonts and knows a bunch of people that sells fonts, I can tell you, if you're not aware, like the reason people put fonts for free, for instance, some fonts are legitimately free because people just believe in giving things away for free, which is cool. But a lot of times the motivation is commercial. You give away a personal license to the font, that makes people integrate the font into their design. And then when it comes time to go into production, then they've used the font, and then you can get them to pay for the commercial license for the font. That happens to me all the time. There's a couple fonts that we give away for free, but the license is personal. So don't assume that. And I mean, we could literally make a whole other free webinar of horror stories of, Brad's told me a few just last night, of people taking things and then you get a horrible awakening when someone writes you that was the creator of the font or whatever after you've published something and says, hey, what's up with this? You never paid me for this. And once it's done, you're kind of over a log. Is that a phrase? Because it's already done. You've done it already. You can't go back. Anyways. Yeah. So just to be clear, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we have officially gotten through everything. We covered the history. We covered each of the steps based on all of the things that we said over a barrel. Thank you. We covered all of the things that we said we were going to cover based on your feedback. We have time to do Q&A. I feel such a sense of satisfaction that we got through this, and knock on wood, I didn't get kicked off. This has just been so good. We've done it. Thank you to everyone who's stuck with us for the second webinar. I feel like it filled in so many things, and all of you guys who stuck around and gave us the feedback to make it better. But do you have time to do Q&A? We're at 2 hours exactly right now. So you want to do Q&A for like 30 minutes or something? I
have a few minutes for Q&A. One thing I did notice that people had mentioned too really quickly was that they were asking about, they're like, oh, so now do we just need to go back and restart, restart or rework our, yeah, that's perfect. Go and rework our illustrations again. You totally can. I won't have the time to give you individualized feedback all over again. But you are definitely free to share it with us, and there's a good chance that when we're promoting this and just showcasing like how this all went, like just kind of rehashing how the whole webinar went. We'll definitely be sharing some of this work on our platform. So yes, please share it with us is the answer, and keep working on these, if not just for yourself. And Dustin, you have what was it, the template that they can put their little golden book in. So if they want to finish edit their books and according to the class that we've just done now and the feedback I've given you, and make some changes and then put it in there and then give it to us or tag us, that would be sweet. But
yeah, let me screen share real quick and I'll show you a little something. I have where is it? I'm just gonna show my desktop. Don't judge me. Wait, can you see my desktop now?
No. Oh yeah.
Don't mess with me. Can you?
I can now.
Okay. So where is it? Okay, so here, if you're on the mid-send, what?
I'm saying good night to everybody who has to leave at this point because there's some people leaving. So thanks for being here. You guys are awesome.
So on the asset page, if you haven't seen, by the way, we've added a ton of stuff. So there's all this stuff that was here. There's also notes from webinar 1 because it was a little more just like haphazard. So we actually invested a good deal of time and energy and money in getting it organized for you into a nice PDF. We also have 7 video tutorials of how to add textures in both Procreate and in Photoshop with different techniques. But the really, really cool part is right here, you can download this template from Bill Akunovic's, I know I'm ruining that, Jr. And you can share it on Instagram. And if you use the hashtag RSCO Golden Book and tag Retro Supply, and I need to update this so it says Brave the Woods too. But if you do that, like, we can't guarantee you're going to get feedback, but we'll see it. We'll likely post and share your work. It will be kind of cool to see a lot of them put out there into the wild. And then we certainly can add some comments, and you know Brad will see it if you tag Brave_the_Woods.
Somebody else is Brave the Woods. It's frustrating.
Yeah.
The
I'm going to go right this second and, I can't. Because I'll go and edit and put your name on here too. But please, if nothing else, go and get this template and post it onto Instagram so everyone can see this. I think it would just be really neat to have a collection of this stuff, and be sure to tag us. Okay.
No deadline. No deadline. Someone's asking about a deadline. There's no deadline for that. Post it just when you get it finished. I know we're running into holidays and things, but it'd just be fun to see these being released, and for anything, even just the very least for us to see it, because I'm really curious to see what you what changes you make, and but yeah. Anyway, we'll make sure to be responding on Instagram and stuff like that to you guys, and I'm looking forward to it.
Not to mention other people in the group will see it. You guys will all become friends, and then they'll help you out too. Sorry, one last thing, and then I'll get off this. We also added, because after the first one, I think we were both like, okay, we really want to over-deliver to you guys. So we added this Woodland Wonderland illustration tutorial. This is like a deep dive where Brad does like over 60 minutes of an illustration that's also very much inspired by Golden Books. We were talking, when we made this, we were talking about Golden Books. We've also included the Mid-Century Throat Backpack, which is like 4 or 5 PDFs on mid-century color and design and all sorts of stuff. That retails for $29. You can download it for free. Plus, we're giving you paper artifacts, which is a bunch of paper stuff I've found from all over the country over the years of having Retro Supply. That's normally $19. You can go grab that for free now, too. So that stuff is all on this site for you. And literally, this was all done because we really wanted to over-deliver, because we realized that first webinar was a little crazy. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing, and then we can go back to more questions.
Yeah. Are there any? Is there a Q&A section on this one?
So there's some questions.
Okay.
We'll answer this live. So Lori asked, Brad, do you limit the number of colors you use in an illustration?
Yes. Well, it depends on the illustration. This kind of illustration, where it's a lot more going on in it, like the backgrounds, I clearly am adding a lot of colors, it feels like. The way I do that, though, is I'll stick with my main core colors, and I'll do, like I said, in the color palettes, I'll deviate slightly and make different variations of that same color, but I'll try to stick within those hues. So that's what I do if I'm going to make something with a ton of color. But a lot of the times I'll work with when I'm doing something more graphic, like I don't have an example in my hand, but I could show, if you look at my website, you'll see some of the work that I do is very limited in colors. And that's usually just when I'm doing something a little bit more graphic, or if I have limitations with printing. So I do both. This one I use a lot of colors, but like I said, I'll just venture off from the same color, the main core colors that I start with.
Great. Cool. Okay. So the next question is from Corey George, says, can you include okay, this is an easy one. Can you include instructions to install the Procreate brushes on the resources page? I tried, but for some reason couldn't figure out how to install the brush set. Thanks. Yeah, you bet. We can totally do that. We have instructions already pre-made for other brush sets. So we'll add that. Probably not tonight because I probably want to eat dinner and go to sleep and take a breath that did get kicked off this thing by my internet. But yeah, we'll add that.
But a quick tip on that, if it's in a zipped file, it won't. What you sent us, because I tried to open it too, it was sent as a file, like a zip file with two different folders in it. Or if you just try to open it with a straight, like just with the main folder, open the folder all the way and look for the brush file, the individual brush file. And then I just drag that into, I just airdrop it on mine. I just airdropped it onto my iPad, and it automatically puts it into Procreate for me.
Yeah, me too. I just like right click, airdrop, and if you have, I don't know if you have to have Procreate open, but I always have Procreate open, and then it just automatically just populates into it.
As long as you've taken it out of its packaging, so out of the zip file, out of the individual folder, and just that one. You can't just drag the whole thing over, else it tries to put it in a file folder for you. So undo it completely, open it, go down just to that file. Anyway, go ahead.
Timothy Kelly had also asked, for your shading, did you learn this on your own? For the hay, did you layer the colors together in many layers? But yeah, how did you learn this? I'm interested in that too. How did you learn these things?
I went to school and took color theory. I think this is where my fine art background helps. I did a lot of painting as a kid. I painted a lot. I did a lot of acrylic painting. So you just you naturally know, like the little things that I'm doing with like the multiply, like layers and different like values of color. That's all from my painting days. And like Justin, you already mentioned it. I feel like every time you go back to get more paint, it picks up a little bit of something else. Or you're like, I want to add a little bit more blue. Sometimes just that blue didn't get mixed in with that yellow, so it doesn't go completely green. It has like a big blue streak in the green that you wiped on your canvas. And I'm like, oh, that looks really cool. It just looks more interesting, a little more natural, a little more approachable. So those are like happy little accidents that you just kind of embrace. And so for me, it was all from just taking my painting past and then bringing it to here, because this is what we're doing. This is what you would be doing with painting, but you're doing it digitally. So I try to mimic a lot of those, because what they did in the Golden Books is they painted it. Or, you know, we're mimicking gouache and all these other things. That just happened from them painting it. And we're always like, why does ours look so flat and so computerized and so digital? It's because you're making it on the computer, and you have to mimic the circumstances, right? Be like, you kind of have to add in the random paint strokes that maybe, because that's not going to just randomly happen with your digital brush. You're going to have to add in a little bit of extra highlighted blue manually, because your brush isn't going to do that for you, whereas it could be just an accident with real painting. So
sorry, you just triggered my ShamWow part of my brain. Just so since it's Cyber Week, and we're talking about adding like things that are non-digital or analog looking, everything on Retro Supply right now is 50% off. You can literally go to the site and there's a code. It's just for this week. We do it like once a year during this time of year. So you should really go buy a bunch of stuff. No, not really. You actually have all sorts of awesome stuff that you're getting for free. Use that, but I just want to let you guys know.
On that note, it's Cyber Week over. We didn't do Cyber Monday because we totally missed. We were so late on it. We thought about it halfway through, so we made Cyber Week at Brave Outpost. So I'm going to put that in here. If you guys want to get 25% off anything in our shop, off your order, you can go do that at braveoutpost.com.
I highly recommend his hats. I own both color versions, and I literally wear them so much. People are like, what is your problem?
They're so comfortable. Honestly, if I didn't even have my patch on it, you'd want to buy it just because it's so comfortable.
They're comfortable. I have a very big head and the hat fits me comfortably. So anyways, yeah, plus he's got this really cool Sylvester Stallone print. I don't know if that's still available, but I love that thing. And right behind me, I've got his one of his bug posters, which he has a dinosaur one too, and a space one, and my daughters absolutely love it. Okay, but let's continue on. So Tim also asked, I noticed that you both have a picture of a heart with a yellow background. What does it mean? Do you want to answer that, or do you want me to answer that?
Hold on, I just saw too that Ashley said, did you send out the bonus prints from the initial webinar for signing up for this? We're going to get those made, and we'll send those out to you. I apologize. That has been something that we had talked about and then forgot about. Now we're bringing it back. So thank you for reminding us. Yes, we're going to get those printed. That was the camping scene. Dustin, you remember?
Oh, yeah.
So we need to, yeah, we had Lenny was going to do that for us. And so I don't know if he's already, I felt like did I already send him the file? If I didn't, we're sending it right after this because good. Thanks for reminding me. Yes, we will send it out to all those people who signed up during the initial free webinar.
Yep, for sure.
Okay. Sorry about this. Sorry, what was the question? The next one, who was it from?
Oh, this was another one from Timothy Kelly. He had said, I noticed you both have a picture of a heart with a yellow background. What does it mean?
It's Alan Peters. I gotta find his website real quick, and I'll put his little link up. Alan Peters made it. I don't know. I think he made it for. I don't know who he originally made it for, but I know that they used it for Inch by Inch as their buttons. You remember?
Yeah, I remember that. And if I remember, isn't he like the creative director or something at Target or something like that?
He was a creative director at Target, and he went off, and now he's doing his own thing. So you can find his work right there. His stuff's awesome. He's a super talented designer.
If you want to feel sad about like your badge game, go look at his badges. They will make you, well, they'll inspire you, and they'll also make you sad because they're so good.
It really will. And he did them for, so I put it in there. There's Alan Peters, but he also, and he did that, I think he did it for Inch by Inch, which is awesome. You'll have to go look it up on your own time. I put a link in there. But yeah, anyway, that's the answer.
Okay, then Megan asks, when do we submit the final? The answer to that is you don't submit the final. What you submitted was what you submitted, and then we give you feedback on it. So now you can post onto Instagram, and you tag us, but in the copy for the sale of the event, you submit it once, we give you feedback, but we don't, I mean, it's very time consuming. It takes hours and hours and hours and hours of time to do. So it's just the one submission.
The feedback took me so long. I thought for sure, I was like, oh, I can kind of, I wasn't cheapening the experience, but I was thinking, I was like, well, what if I had like some canned answers? If I heard the same thing over and over again, I kind of give like a canned response for that. So it just saved me some time because there was so many things to look through. It took me forever. But I ended up like thinking like, it took so long because every time I looked at it, I was like, well, I want to at least provide some, like I want to reference your work directly. So instead of doing a canned answer, I gave you the answer, and then I tried to apply it directly to what you were doing and maybe give you an example if I could of how to fix it or how to change it or whatever. So it took me a long time, but it was a fun process, and now I understand how long and grueling it could be for teachers to grade papers. Grade papers, or even like art teachers just looking at art and just trying to like give feedback. It's a lot of work, and I was just trying to put things into words and try to make it so that it was, because I'm not there to explain it to you or draw it for you. I just had to give it to you, and like that's the importance of learning how to write well and taking your English classes in college, because it really helps out to be able to articulate what you want to say as a designer.
Yeah, huge thanks to you for that, because we did have a system which was to find the most common critiques and then have like a canned response is not the best answer for that, because they would be custom, but obviously you get a lot of the same questions over and over, the same things come up, but you really dug into each one individually. There is not any repetition of anything. It's so
no, could, every single person could compare them against the other one and it wouldn't be the same at all.
Yeah, 100%. Brennan Davis asked, is there a time to being able to download the stuff you added to the resource page? There's no like official time, but the videos, for instance, take up bandwidth that I pay for on my account. So I will eventually take that down. So I would say, you know, don't wait too long. I mean, I'll probably keep it up for a couple months. But yeah, I would download the stuff at some point. Don't just assume that the page will be there forever, but I'll keep it there for at least 3 months.
Yes.
Ben Jones had asked, what was the book you referenced earlier when you were talking about your value test?
Right. I think we're going to put it in it's called Writing with Pictures. I'm going to put a link in here real quick. I think Suzanne did it. Suzanne, I know you're there. I feel bad it's late for you.
Hello.
If you could put that Writing with Pictures on Amazon link, if you could put that up there again, that'd be awesome.
Cool. Yeah. And then I'll put it onto that page too.
Oh, there it is. She put it up. She's awesome.
Yeah.
Suzanne's such a cute girl.
Yeah, I was going to say huge thanks to Suzanne. So Suzanne, she's been on the whole time. She's been answering the questions, finding links to send you guys. She's in the South. So right now it's
late. Yeah,
it's like 10 something for her. Plus she's been working all day. So she's so great. So huge thanks to her. Yeah. Next question is, this is a very specific one, but can you talk through this is from Brett Cox. He says, can you talk through the decision to add the dark green shrub behind the castle wall?
That's funny you brought that up, because that's one I debated doing, because I thought it would draw too much attention. I don't know. Did you feel that way? If you're still there, Timothy, I'm curious to know why you asked that question. I wanted to bring it in. The reason why I brought it in was I wanted to add another layer of depth and maybe height, so it looked like it would be like you're up in a castle, not necessarily on the ground level. It made more sense with the background, like having the road wind off into the hills. If it was a little bit higher up, so I wanted it to be like the tops of trees. I guess it could be taken as a bush, but it also brought in more green, so I like the green off of the yellow, and it plays off the blue with the hat. So if I did it just in the hat, it might be kind of weird. So bringing it into the back with that, I felt was necessary. I don't know, but that was it. That was my thinking on it. It might be too distracting. It is a little heavy. I also had the window on the castle as black, and it was way too heavy, so I made it like a dark blue, so it didn't draw your eye too far off. But that might even be a little bit too high and like too dark of a value. But I can go back afterwards. The great thing is because I'm not finished with it yet, but when I do go and finish it, I can go afterwards and to put it in Photoshop and put it in black and white, just convert it to black and white, and go take a look at it and see, where those, if I stuck true to my initial value test, and if it doesn't hold up, then I can go back and change that. So yeah,
nice.
That was why.
We have 12 minutes left, so I'm gonna speed through a little bit. Susanna Mosher, asks, you have such a good gesture and taper in your line work. When working in Photoshop, do you adjust your Wacom settings or adjust brush settings within Photoshop?
Sorry, say it one more time.
Yeah, you have such a good gesture and taper on your line work. When you're
I just wanted to hear that again. That's it. Sorry. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead. Keep going. Sorry.
Oh, that was a statement. No. When we're working in Photoshop, do you adjust your tablet or your brush settings in Photoshop?
Yes, I do. Sometimes,
or is it just that the brushes are Retro Supply brushes and they're really good?
I only use Retro Supply brushes, and they're the best of all the brushes. No, I just have so many brushes. I feel like sitting there tweaking a brush too much it's just too much time for me. Like I'll maybe adjust it once. On Procreate, I probably adjust it more than in Photoshop. I really don't do it a lot unless I'm trying to change the angle of the brush. Like if it's got a severe chisel tip to it, and it's at like a specific angle, like a 45-degree angle, I want to change that. I'll do that just so I have a different look, and I don't have to have a whole new brush for it. But mostly I don't. I have so many different brushes, or I just save that brush at a different angle and I just use it later. In Procreate, it's really easy. Procreate's really, really easy to go through and manipulate your brushes. And so I do it a little bit more in there. But not really, not all the time. I'm too lazy to do that. I'll just buy another brush, or I'll have Dustin make me another one, and then we'll sell it.
So some of you might know Brad and I collaborate a lot on brush packs, and the deal is basically he does the artwork, I do the brushes, and he is brutal. I send so many brushes this way, and he's just like, "This is hot garbage," and yeah. So we get some really good brushes because Brad is so great at being honest with me.
The quality, it all comes down to something that I have to be brutally honest, because if I say like, oh yeah, it looks great, and then I don't want to actually use it, then there's no point for me to do it, because the whole way it works, the way it works is, the reason why we team up is because you want to have, like, it's nice to have, like, for me to help endorse it as an professional illustrator. So if I'm using them all the time and I feel comfortable using them all the time, then it's easier to pitch to other people. And honestly, I do use these brushes all the time. I use our brushes 98% of the time in all my illustrations, because he's making them for me and for what I use it for, and they meet my standards. And so I feel like, and it feels like it works. We obviously have a ton of professional artists that use them and love them. Luke Flowers, Matt Koffenberg, Chris Lee, so many amazing artists that just love them, that, it speaks for itself. But yeah, I'm very, very harsh on him, on his brush making.
I mean, we're joking. You're nice about it, but you're truthful about it. But yeah, that's what I really like about it, is because you just know by the end of it. Like, for instance, on the Procreate brushes, the mid-century Procreate brushes, which you guys got like a handful of for this pack up. I mean, I don't know. There must have been 40 or 50, and it just got whittled down until there was just 15 strong ones. Okay, so moving on. Natalie Mitchell said, I joined late, so I apologize if you already said this, but will you be posting all the student work, or do we just see it if they post it on Instagram? So it would be cool to post it all, but probably if they post it on Instagram, the reason being that, people, it's a busy time of year, and I wanted to respect everyone's work. Unless everyone just had said yes, I don't want to just be posting everyone's work. So they get to volunteer if they want to post it. It's not really my choice to make the decision for people if they want everyone to see it.
Should they give them a hashtag?
There is a hashtag.
Should we just make a hashtag that everybody uses right now? Is there one you could think of?
There's already tag us. On the site.
What did you say?
On the resource page, there's already a hashtag. RSCO Golden Book.
Oh, perfect. Okay. I clearly didn't go through all the resources. Okay, perfect.
Let's see. So Brennan Davis said, where do we view this video later? I came in late. To be honest with you, I'm not 100% sure. I'm probably going to post this live to my own server. So I'll have to send you guys a link. This is our first time doing an actual webinar with this, and it's so much better, but I'm not sure yet, so I'll update you.
Yeah, so much better.
Let's see. Timothy Kelly asks, do you guys jam together? I see you both have guitars.
No, he's way better than I am. Like, he actually went to school for this. I just pluck around and sing songs to my kids before they go to bed. So
that's literally what I do too. My guitar is used for wheels on the bus, like literally 85% of the time these days.
Oh yeah, mine's a lot of Beatles songs for my kids. They like Beatles and Johnny Cash before they go to bed.
Wow, your kids are pretty hip.
They are pretty hip.
Yeah, mine's a lot of Wheels on the Bus. It's real popular. But yeah. Although I do play Mother Nature's Son for all of them, except I'll try to change it to Mother Nature's Girl, but it's hard to sing that way. But anyways,
yeah, please don't lump me in with Dustin on that. Dustin's amazingly talented at the guitar. But yeah, no.
Okay, I appreciate it. I think you're pretty darn good.
Take it.
Corey George says, can you share the presentation Dustin went through tonight? Yeah, I'd be happy to upload that later this week, or not tonight probably, but yeah, I don't see any reason why not. Okay, that one's already been answered. Megan says, oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so she wanted to just reiterate. So I misunderstood her question. She didn't mean are we going to resubmit again? She meant for the competition judging, not for more feedback. I wouldn't expect that of you guys. This was amazing. Oh, okay. Thanks, Megan. Yeah, that's a good question. So we thought about doing that tonight. Honestly, I don't know if you felt this way, Brad, but I was so anxious about making sure that we just really did this well that I wasn't concerned about trying to award the winners on here. I was concerned about making sure we got the information. So we will go through, and then we're going to send those out. Gosh, I guess the best way to do it would be, I don't want to exclude people that don't want to publicly submit it. So I guess, do we notify them privately, or would you only notify people that publicly submit on Instagram?
Oh, are you saying for like the winner of, yeah.
Because we have the 3 winners. Yeah. We have the wild card winner. Yeah. We have the concept winner. And then we have like.
Random.
Yeah.
Most creative, most essentially. Yeah. Yeah. Just so we make sure. Well, if we do choose, yeah, because what if we have a hard time getting a hold of somebody after we choose it, like pick them as a winner and we can't post it? Maybe let's just say if you want to be submitted for it, just put it up on Instagram. Let's just make that be part of the contest. I'm sorry if you don't want to show. I mean, like I feel like everybody would be pretty cool with sharing their stuff. Hopefully they're excited to share it. You should be. I've seen all your stuff. There's nothing to hide, nothing to be. There's no reason for you not to want to share it. But yeah, share it and tag it. The only thing I can see as being a problem there is if someone doesn't have Instagram.
Megan's asking for a deadline. Okay, so the deadline is the end of this week. I'm writing it down. So that will be the deadline. You can share whenever you want. If you want to be in the runnings for a prize, submit it by Friday at midnight. We'll announce a winner on.
So do you want to have them submit it just by like tagging on Instagram?
Yeah, so you can submit it by Friday at midnight, Pacific Standard Time, by tagging it on Instagram with the tag on the resources page Friday. I'm writing this down. And we'll announce a winner the following Wednesday. So you can post it anytime after that, but if you want to be considered for the prizes, then do that.
Yeah.
Okay,
cool.
Done.
I got one last question. We got one last question in us.
Oh yeah, I've got this really cool timer. It's like this visual timer for kids, but I use it myself. Yeah, so we just got a little time. Timothy, you have a lot of questions here. Sorry we didn't get to all of them. I'm going to go through a couple others because we've answered a couple already. So we're going to not be able to answer everybody's, but we'll do 2 more I think we can get through. Alex Parker asked, has retro 50s design style come to be a big part of y'all's personal design style, or do you see it as more of an interesting visual vibe to dive into every once in a while?
I think we could both speak to this if I feel the same way. I just am really drawn to that era. I love a lot of the illustrators and designers that came out of there. A lot of the illustrators were acting like designers, and a lot of the designers were acting like illustrators. So I call them design-illustrators, and that's kind of that's the bucket I guess I would fall in, is someone who knows design but also does illustration. Right, I like merging those two. So you're communicating and you're trying to solve specific problems as opposed to just being loosey-goosey fine art, which I love to do, but it's separate. It's separate. So than commercial art. But yeah, I feel like I've always just been drawn to it because as a designer, I love that it's so graphic. I love the bold colors and things like that. But also, like I've told many of you before, I grew up spending time at my grandparents' farmhouse in West Virginia, and I stayed in my uncle's bedroom. His bedroom when he was a kid, it was still set up exactly the same with all of his 60s science books and erector sets and Hardy Boys books and all of this stuff, the little golden book, all that stuff from the 60s. And so I was kind of oversaturated like in that world when I was young. So I feel like that's been a reason why I've liked it so much.
Yeah, I had strangely, almost exact same story. Because my grandparents, when I was a kid, babysat there a lot. And they lived in a 1940s ranch style house in California. And they had inherited it from my great aunt. And one of her stipulations was that the house not be disturbed in the sense that how it was decorated. So it was decorated I mean, it looked like late 1950s, 60s. I mean, all over the house. So when I started Retro Supply 6 years ago, I had moved down there when my grandfather passed away, and we were taking care of my grandmother. And I mean, I was just around all this stuff and just brought back memories. And so the business was largely started because I was back around this stuff from when I was a kid. So we actually have really similar stories as to why.
I didn't realize that. Yeah, I don't think you've ever told me that.
Yeah, that's why. It's like very nostalgic for me.
That's a good word. Yeah, it's definitely nostalgic for me as well.
Yeah.
You can tell all the crap I collect is all old mid-century stuff.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I don't think I could have ran a business for 6 years doing this if I didn't have a real interest in it. Okay, so the last question is from Lori Rudolph. Hi, Lori. She says, "So Brad, was it the big wash brush from Puss in Boots Belly?"
No, it's the gouache butter, I think. I feel like I've already asked this one. I've answered it a few times, and that's what the joke is.
Oh, have you?
Yeah, no, I did but I was answering it, I think for a little while, I was answering it privately to you, and I couldn't figure out why they weren't listening to me. They're like still guessing what the brush was, and I was like, I just said it's gouache butter. So I kept putting it down there. Yeah, gouache butter sounds amazing too. But yeah, that was the brush.
Nice.
That was awesome. This I felt like this went over so much better. I know this is usually what Dustin and I do after this. We kick you guys off, we're all done, and we go, whew. I felt like that was terrible, or I felt like that was amazing. And I'm going to do it right now because I did feel like that was a lot more successful. I felt like I was clearer in the delivery, and same with you. And the message was linear, so people could follow it. I just felt like it was a good time, and I'm glad you guys stuck around with us, and we recovered, I hope, from our first video. It was a big learning curve for us.
Yeah, for sure. I think after the first one, it was our first one, so we had some mistakes. And that night when it happened, I was like, well, it's okay because, that's how you learn is you do this. And now we just need to over deliver and do our best to make it right for everyone by just doing as much awesome stuff as we can. And yeah, thanks to everyone who stuck around. Some people were like, forget about it. That was crazy. So I hope that in this one, I hope we delivered enough value with the extras on the resource page and the videos on the resource page. And I mean, Brad literally did a whole nother illustration, which was not something that he signed up for. He totally just volunteered to do. So huge thanks to you for that, Brad, because I know you have like a 16 illustration gig that you're on a deadline to do, and you took the time out to make that illustration for the class. So that was pretty.
It was worth it. Well, it was worth it. I made more work for myself, but I think it was worth it because looking at your guys' work, and I tried to make something that kind of incorporated all the feedback I was giving you so I could point to it and use it as this lesson today. So it was worth it to me. And I didn't want you to look at the same thing, but it was a lot of fun. And you guys really, honestly, another thing that really struck me is after I did all that feedback, it made me want to illustrate another one. I was like, man, everybody did such a good job. I don't even know if I did a good enough job on the first one. So I'm going to do another one and really think about I work on it, and I feel like I'm incorporating a lot of this stuff anyways, just because I incorporate it without even thinking about it. But this time I went through and thought about all the feedback I gave you, wrote out the feedback that I was giving you, and then made an illustration per the feedback I gave you guys. So it was good for me, and you guys really motivated me. And I felt like after you did some, honestly, some of those I was just like, these are too good. Like, I don't know why they're here taking this class from me. So thanks for doing that.
Yeah, there was amazing stuff. Well, huge thanks. First of all, huge thanks to all of you guys for signing up and taking a leap of faith and being in the class. I know that you didn't know exactly what you were going to get. So thank you guys for supporting us doing this. Huge thanks to Brad. Brad is like my brother from a different mother. He over delivers. He works his butt off. I appreciate you, Brad. I really appreciate it. I know you put a lot of extra work into this, so I hugely appreciate that. And then huge thanks to Suzanne, who staying up late helping with this. Retro Supply wouldn't run without Suzanne. So thanks to everybody. It's been awesome. And yeah, I guess with that, we'll go. I'll send you guys an email with the updates of the stuff that I promised. And be sure to submit your work on Instagram with that hashtag.
Sounds good, guys. Thank you guys so much. Have a good night.
Have a good night.